All right, well, welcome to the show, everybody. This is Fifth Street Sports and our special podcast edition coming to you live this wonderful Saturday. I'm Nick Geber, Nolan, Dalla, Frank Perez, and very pleased to welcome to the show today Mr. Mike Shackleford from Wizard of Odds. Mike, thanks so much for joining us in our studios today.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have a special guest. I might say you are the first guest we've actually had in the studio.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
And you lived to get here.
Yeah, I actually live pretty close to here.
Not too far, I hope. So that's
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Well, we've got a great show to get to today. We've got lots of stuff we're going to talk about because, folks, this is a podcast edition, and we are not on the radio network today on this show. We're going to have a slightly more relaxed format, which I think everybody will appreciate.
We're always relaxed.
Well, some people are more relaxed. Now,
some of us are more relaxed than others.
What do you have?
Well, listen, I'm waiting for our first, let's say, adult beverage endorsement. So I'm going to endorse my own stuff. I think we had Jameson week 1. Gewürztraminer week 2.
You went with a white wine last week.
I'm forgetting now today was my favorite red wine of all, which is Châteauneuf de Pape from the Rhone Valley. I'm a big French wine connoisseur, and if one of you gentlemen want to imbibe with me, I bought an extra glass. And if not, I'll drink the whole bottle.
Can I ask you a wine question?
Sure.
I know it's totally ungambling related.
Oh yes, it is. It is gambling related.
All right, I just came from Europe, and in Barcelona and Paris, a glass of wine in a restaurant costs €1 or €1.50. Why does it cost $7 to $10 here?
You have just hit an absolute beef of mine as to why the markup in American restaurants, even in resort cities like Las Vegas, the bottle of wine is 4x. In other words, 4 times the retail price, which is why you don't see people drinking wine as much here. I think a lot of it is the cost. I mean, people can make the restaurants, which are largely corporate, can make more money off mixed beverages, draft beers, etc. In Europe, I think it's more of just part of the culture, and so the markup there is 1.5 to 2x. So that's why almost every time you go out in Europe, you'll see bottles of wine everywhere.
Yeah, Europe is just wine heaven.
Well, you were talking about 1x and 2x markups on wine. Nolan, we were talking, before we started the show, we were looking at some video poker speed records, which Mike has on his site. And I was wondering, Nolan, did you set the wine drinking speed record? How many bottles a minute can you do?
Just a second. I got a real quick thing. I'm nothing compared to something I just saw. On ESPN this week, they have a documentary on the life of Andre the Giant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Great wrestler.
Great wrestler.
7'4", 500 pounds, just a giant of a man. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, he was a wrestler in the 60s, 70s, 80s. He died of a heart attack, tragically. A very kind, they called him a gentle giant. This man talk about the drinking record. I'm not making this up. In one setting, he drank 104 beers. He drank a case of wine in one setting. That's 12 bottles. 12 of these in one setting. And by the way, and then just walked out the door straight as an arrow. So talk about somebody can pack it.
So in other words, Nolan, a lightweight.
I am a lightweight, every way, shape, or form. But after I heard that, I was like, wow, now I can just do whatever I want.
Trivia, what was his big movie, and what was the name of his character?
Oh, Andre.
I know this. Yes. Actually, I don't remember the character though. And should I give it away or?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The Princess
Bride.
Yep.
I don't remember the character though.
His character was named Fezzik.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Really?
And that's where our own Steve Fezzik gets his name from.
I didn't know that.
I hope I'm allowed to say that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No idea.
Wow.
That's funny. Steve's coming on the show here in a week or two, right?
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing a video podcast series, by the way. If you tune into the show on a weekly basis, we're going to be adding a lot of content. I do a show every Friday called Fifth Street Soccer. We're going to be adding some very interesting one-on-one sit-downs with interesting characters and people in the various businesses.
Including Mike, by the way.
Including
We'll
Mike.
get Mike later on, for sure.
We will be sitting down and talking to Mike one-on-one. But check out our website, and maybe Boggs can put that up there for everybody so where they can see us. It's at fifthstreetsports.com, or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Fifth Street Sports Talk. You can see it there. Look at that.
By the way, props to you, Nick, by the way. Props to you, because you're not going to talk, you're going to brag about yourself too much, but your radio show that you put out on Friday, it's Fridays, is when the show airs, or and you can watch it later on. You're just on fire in soccer.
Well, I am a bit. I have to admit, I do the show with Nick Webster, who is an old colleague of mine. Nick is the former voice of the Premier League on Fox. We both colleagues. He actually produced my TV show on Fox. That's how I know Nick, going back 20 years. But he does the show with me, and look, between Nick and I, you've got 40 years of analysis of the Premier League. So we've been around the block a bit. We've seen an awful lot in that league. We both grew up with it as kids. So when it comes to the big global football, we are on top of it. But yeah, picks have been particularly good. It's been a very interesting season, particularly in England, where the promoted teams this year did surprisingly well, and some teams that have been struggling or teetering around sort of mid-table mediocrity for a number of seasons have finally just sort of given up the ghost. So there's been a lot of movement, and then of course at the top there's a lot of people fighting for those top positions. Tell you what, why don't we bring in another resident of Fifth Street who's not actually here right now in person, but we'll bring him in both in spirit and in voice and through the wonders of computerized video. Well, let's go chat to Oklahoma Brian. Let's bring him in. Brian, are you there?
There he is.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
A handsome man.
Look at that. Lovely outfit you're wearing there, Brian. Is that your jammies?
I was at a kid's soccer game. It was about 35 degrees and windy, so I found the warmest thing I could find.
Wow.
Insulated clothes.
Well, now you are back in Oklahoma. Now you were in San Antonio earlier for the Final Four, of course. How's the weather? How's the weather in Oklahoma comparing? Because I have to tell you, the surroundings look awfully familiar.
Well, we travel with the same set, so it's going to look the same no matter where I am.
That's awesome. All right, guys. So look, we got a lot of topics we want to get to today. We're very pleased to have Mike with us, of course. So we're going to be talking a lot of casino gambling. We're going to be talking about video poker, which is a great weakness of mine. And my little story of video poker is I was going through a very nasty divorce. I was playing a lot of 10-play dollar double bonus at the Rio because I was doing the World Series of Poker.
So that divorce cost you twice as much.
Well, no. And, of course, I lost a lot of money. I mean, over the course of that year, probably a number of hundreds of thousands, but I hope this doesn't make it. There, I've said it. But I also was hitting a lot of jackpots, obviously, right? Because you play 10-play dollars, you're getting, any sort of bonus hand. You can get, low pair with the kicker. All you need is two of them, and they're writing you a W2G, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I got a terrible call from my attorney. He was very concerned. My ex-wife has asked for an emergency meeting with the judge because I've been hiding about $600,000 worth of income. She had been intercepting all of these W2Gs that the Harrows had been sending to my house where I was no longer living, and didn't understand that, of course, that was only the win side of the equation. That had nothing to do with the loss side of the equation.
You win all the time.
So exactly. So that was a very uncomfortable discussion I had to have with the judge about why that was not really revenue. And then when he looked me straight in the eye and said, "But why are you doing that?" I don't really know what I could say to that, except, it's better than living with her.
Oh, wow. We need a drum set.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna, lots of stuff to get to today, but I want to start off the discussion by talking a little bit about a story that's come up. Look, we had a nice laugh about Steve Wynn, our favorite rub and tug man, a couple of weeks ago, and he's now divested from Wynn. He's gone. He sold all of his shares, which is a shame because he may personally be, one shade shy of a scumbag. But in terms of a visionary and a casino visionary and a mogul, and look, you can walk any property in the Strip. And how long has Wynn been open, guys? What, 10 years, 12 years?
Oh,
at this point?
I think more than that.
more than that.
Yeah, I think about 20.
I don't think it's been open quite that long, but
I know
close,
he opened
right?
Mirage in 90, right?
Yeah, you know what? I'll flip open the
90 or
Star
80.
You're
Wars
talking
laptop
about the
here.
Mirage roughly
Yeah.
90.
89
Bellagio
or
was
90.
90.
And then Bellagio was what,
98.
3 or 4?
And then the win, I think, is 10 years later because he had a non-compete. Remember that?
Yeah.
When he left MGM Mirage, he had a non-compete. He couldn't open at his own place, I think, for 8 or 10 years. So, unless I'm wrong, it was 2007, 8, or 9 is when the first win opened.
Gosh, I got to think it's longer than that.
No, I don't think so, actually. And I think I just might have looked this up not too long ago. But whatever. The point I'm making is that You can go to just about any one of these strip casinos that were at the time they opened terrific. The Bellagio, okay. I'm sorry, it's run down. It's long in the tooth.
You mean since
What
he
is?
left? Since he stopped running?
No, just in general. You can walk in the Bellagio now. I mean, it's starting to show its age a little bit. You know, these big
Really?
properties that were once the most beautiful, glamorous, glorious thing. I mean, look, at one point, the Luxor was an incredible experience to go to, right? I remember when they opened the Excalibur. I was here for the opening. I mean, now, you know, you're lucky to escape with your life, I mean, let alone winning anything. But the point I'm making is you can go to Wynn, any of the Wynn properties, and they are always pristine. The attention to detail is superb. The properties themselves are magnificent, magnificent temples to debauchery. The latest news is that MGM is in discussions, sniffing around like a dog in a park. You know, it's that phase, right? I mean, you know, where they are doing the dance, and it looks like MGM are moving in to buy Wynn. And I think, from my perspective, if that does come to pass, that will be an absolute tragedy.
Yeah, and I'd like to get, obviously, we all have opinions on this. I think one of the biggest things that we, as consumers or customers or gamblers, we have to worry about is when you have a monopoly or less competition, particularly in gambling or on the strip. If they're the only game in town, they set the rules, they set the odds, they set the prices. They can pretty much do what they want. The great thing about Las Vegas, gentlemen, you've both been here longer than I think both of us, is that when Las Vegas started out, it was, you know, when you went to every different casino, they were all owned by different people, and it was very competitive. They really had to work hard to get your dollar, right?
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Well, look at the MGM set this pay for parking thing. They're the ones that first started it. I've been here since 1964. I could never conceive of having to pay $20 to park in Vegas. MGM started that, and now you're just down to Treasure Island and Venetian, and a lot of the Harrah's properties, of course. But before you know it, I think within 2 years, everybody's going to charge for parking.
Yeah. Well, Mike, let me ask you this. We obviously know the downside of that. We see what happens at the MGM properties and very corporate oriented. Is there any upside to a takeover like this?
No, competition is a good thing, and I lamented when MGM bought Mandalay and Harrah's bought Park Place. And now most of the strip is controlled by just two companies. It's a bad thing, and it's going to get even worse if MGM gobbles up Wynn. I really hope it doesn't happen, and I think Wynn is a good place to play. I really always have a good time there. Always leave happy.
2005, by the way.
2005.
2005.
He was right. 13.
Thank you,
13
Wikipedia.
years.
But it opened on. Says right here. Anyway, 2005. Forget the date exactly.
I'm sorry. Can I ask something of both of you gentlemen? I'm curious about one thing about the Wynn and say the MGM takes them over. Does that mean the sportsbook odds, they won't be independent any longer, and they'll just copy the board of
Probably.
everyone else?
Which
is
for sure.
really bad for sports gamblers because you want to have as many outs and as many potentially a variety of numbers. Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Plus, you're going to lose a great guy in Johnny Avello, who runs that Wynn. He's a special character in the sports industry.
They have a great sports book there.
Yeah, really. They really do. You know what I was going to take? Nick, now that we have Brian on for a limited time with Mike, I really wanted to get to that NCAA thing with
why don't we do that? Let's go back to Brian Allen, Oklahoma Brian. You want to talk, we'll talk about the NCAA?
Yeah, Mike had an interesting thing in the brackets you had, right?
Yeah, so one thing that always drives me crazy is around March Madness, the media quote what, in their opinion, is the probability of the perfect bracket. And it's always a number that is way, way off. One number that you hear bandied around a lot is basically 1 in 2 to the 63rd power, which is what it would be if you just picked randomly every game, which comes to 9.22 times 10 to the 18th power. The odds are nowhere near that long. And would you like me to explain like a very basic strategy to doing a bracket and your probability? It's very simple. You just pick the higher ranked seed every single game. And what I did was I looked at how often, what happened every time a 1 seed played a 16, a 2 of 15, a 3 of 14, every single matchup that could happen if you had this strategy. And going back all the way to 1985. And to make a long story short, if you always pick the higher ranking seed, and then when it got down to 4, number 1 seeds you just picked randomly, the chances of a perfect bracket are 1 in 42,743,890,552.
Oh, that's it, huh?
Yeah, so it's. I mean, I know it's still a huge long shot, but it's nowhere near the ridiculous odds that they always quote in the media. And another thing that they're always quoting in the media is this offer by Warren Buffett that he said he would give any employee $1 million for life if they could fill out a perfect bracket. And even using my strategy, if we assume that the employee lives 60 more years, the expected value, and I also assume that he has, or I didn't assume, you can get off Wikipedia, that he has 377,000 employees. So the expected cost of him for this offer was only $529. So it really was
Cheap
no
bastard.
big deal.
Yeah,
He gets
Good
all this
Lord.
publicity for only $529.
Yeah.
Now, here's another question though for you. I mean, if it's free to enter, why not just get a bot and enter 42 billion times?
If you could do that, you should.
Yeah, well, I would think you would, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's guys. Hey,
Always looking for the.
I can't believe we put this out on the internet. Everybody's going to be doing it now. Oh, good Lord.
That's still unbelievable. 43 billion almost, and that's with his strategy.
Yeah. It could be improved upon a little bit with some intelligent handicapping, but I don't know. It's just something that gets asked of me all the time. So I finally looked at, like I said, every single game going back to the beginning of the tournament and calculated the odds.
You know, you bring up a great point, though. But one of the things that I've learned about gambling here in Las Vegas over the 5 minutes or so I've been doing it. Mom, you're watching this, right? 5 minutes, really. Just started yesterday. I'll give it up, really. Knowing the odds are very, very important. Whether you're playing video poker, which is terrifically important if you're playing, or whether you're playing poker, I mean, that's a big part of your decisions. It's betting habits of your opponents. It's your chances, your outs, the odds of hitting various cards in various positions. But just knowing that fact and educating yourself even to the smallest level can give you an enormous edge against other players that don't get that. And I'm always amazed when I walk into a casino and see the light boards they have next to the roulette table, or the fine Asian people with their pads who love baccarat, taking down every hand, writing down, looking for histories, there are none. I mean, it's a totally random game each time out.
You're absolutely right.
And if it's not a totally random game each time out, get a great lawyer because you just won big. Okay. So,
But you know what I find interesting about that, because I've ran casinos. Obviously, I've been at the Venetian, and they have single green roulette, and then the basic double green roulette. Which and so instead of going like 5.23, because there's two numbers against you, there's only one. The people will still play the one with the two greens.
Well, they have
That's
triple
scary.
zero roulette there
triple
now.
zero now.
Yeah.
Yep. Saw
And
that.
people play it more than the double zero at the same minimum.
It's
Oh, I
ridiculous.
can't
The
believe
more the
that.
zeros, the more people play.
You're losing another 3% or something with another. With
Yeah,
the
it
triple zero?
pumps it from 5.26 to 7.89% house advantage.
Yeah.
And there's never a shortage of players playing it.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing.
That is the game to be in.
So-
Seriously.
I got a
But it's
question for you guys.
Yes, go ahead.
So, hey, Mike, I'm a big fan of your website. I've been looking at it for probably almost 20 years, I think. And I've heard you guys
20 years.
talking.
You did better get away, Brian, if he's looking for it for 20 straight years. Sorry, I had to do that.
But I hear you guys talking a lot about playing perfectly, right? Playing perfect blackjack, perfect poker, which I think is a great thing to aspire to. But I'll just say this. I'm curious what you think about this, Mike. I get a chance to look at a lot of sports betting accounts. People are constantly asking me to evaluate an account and tell me, or have me tell them who this is and what kind of player I think it is. And, if I see an account that plays too perfectly, that is only playing Wong teasers, or her, I suppose, parlays are always somewhat correlated. There's always closing line value on their bets. I start to think maybe this isn't the right player for me. And I think that although playing perfectly is a great thing to aspire to. One of the things that we have to deal with now in this era of big data and super analysis is the ability to play close to perfect but still look like a human. And I don't know a lot about. I only know sports betting, but is that something that comes into play sometimes with blackjack or video poker, trying to make yourself look like a human while still having a significant edge?
Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for the kind words. And regarding video poker, there's such a thin advantage there that most video poker professional players don't smooth it over at all. They play fast, and they always play on the multiple point days, and they are as aggressive as possible, and they just hope to make a living out of it as long as they can. Because if you start giving them cover play on slots, or you don't play on the multiple point days, it really cuts into your winnings a lot. It's expensive to not play when you have the best of it.
But Brian, I know what you're talking about. That I've seen some really, really good blackjack counting teams. Guys that really win. And there is, believe me, I've been on both sides of the blackjack table. I've seen guys who, let's say at the Cosmopolitan, they were spreading 25 to 10,000 in blackjack, with all true odds, 3-2 on blackjack and everything. And these guys were the best that have played blackjack. I seen where, okay, so now the pit boss is watching them. The pit boss is actually watching them, and now there's a really good count. Normally, you would say to yourself, you wanted to put a big bet out there. They would put a small bet, but that wasn't the big disguise. The big disguise was a lot of times when they had like $100 bet and not a $5,000 bet, they would stand on 16 against a face card, take insurance, make really, really tourist kind of like real bad plays. Then the pit boss would see 4 or 5 moves like that. Like, we all know you don't stand on 16 against a 9, or you take insurance with like a bad count, with like a bad thing. So right away, the pit boss would just shake his head and move on to another table. Then they could play. Because at that point, when you have a $100 bet and you stand on a 16 against a 9, you're not really giving away that much. But then they would make their real, right. and it kind of throws their, surveillance off a little bit.
Yeah, I know, like on the sports betting side, I will, it doesn't cost anything really. If I have a open parlay and I see the first leg is clearly a loser, I'll put something that just looks atrocious into the open spots. Or if it's a spot that has open teasers, and I want to look like I'm kind of a recreational player, and I see the first leg, or second leg is about to go down in a teaser, I'll go in and put just, I'll tease a basketball game or something that makes no sense, just to potentially make myself look a little bit less robotic.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now, Mike, are you pretty good at the odds on the NFL teasers and stuff?
I used to love NFL teasers back when the odds were still good. Like you could lay 110 on a 2-teamer and get plus 180 on a 3-teamer and plus 300 on a 4-teamer. But I can't find that anywhere. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Hey guys, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a very quick break, and then we're going to come back. On the other side of the break, we'll pick up the conversation where we left off. You're watching Fifth Street Sports. It's great to be with you. Nick Geber, Nolan Dalla, Frank Perez, special guest Mike Shackleford, and of course, Oklahoma Brian in the window. When we come back, though, we're going to, Brian, we're actually going to have to talk to, or not have to, like we're being forced to, but we're going to talk a little esports, and we're going to welcome to the show a brand new contributor, someone we haven't spoken to on the air before, Cody Luongo from eSportsinsider. So we're going to take a little break, we'll be back with you on the other side. Somebody release my cat from the storage room.
I was wondering where that cat was.
This is I knew we had to figure out where she was.
Uh-huh.
We've never been on the radio, but I think eventually we're going to get on 5 minutes on the syndicate. You're welcome to come on anytime.
Yeah.
Well, we are. The network we're on is, as I said, is a pretty big one. We're on about 500 stations. There she is. She followed me in earlier while I was. Are you having trouble hearing on this, or is it just falling out?
No, I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, Boggs, is she there? Just leave it cracked. She can come out. Just turn the thing around. Okay, if you want to put that back in your ear, we'll go ahead.
This is the most beautiful cat in the world.
Isn't she gorgeous?
This is my Bengal.
Yeah.
Michael, so you don't know this new thing we're going to be doing, but I'm going to do interview.
Hey folks, welcome back to Fifth Street Sports here, live from the basement in Fifth Street. It is great to be with you. Nick Geber, Nolan, Dalla, Frank Perez, and special guest Mike Shackleford joins us. Mike from Wizard of Odds. You can visit his site at wizardofodds.com. A really, really important site. If you like gambling in any way, shape, or form, you need to do yourself a favor and educate yourself so that you're not just giving your money away. And it's a great site to start with, and Mike is a math genius, and I feel, quite frankly, really just like a slug sitting next to him. But I don't know what else to say. But look, one of the things we're going to be talking about a lot.
Nobody argued with you by that in that last remark.
I noticed that, Nolan. Thank you. Exactly. We're going to be talking about all sorts of different gambling, sports betting, the lifestyle, really. I mean, if you like that adrenaline, then you're going to like anything we cover here on this show because it's sports betting, it's gambling. We got it all. There is a massive industry out there, guys, that is in the betting and the sports category that I think our combined ages here put us over the fence, over the threshold for being able to understand it. But there are lots of people who do, and we're talking about esports. I grew up with Pong.
Me too.
Donkey Kong, Gallagher.
Pac-Man.
Let's not forget Zaxxon. Okay,
How about Pac-Man?
Pac-Man. Yeah, it was kind of mainstream.
1970s
Yeah.
games,
Right, that was us.
Right.
You put a
And of course now it's now it's Dota. It's CS:GO. It's
Call of
there's
Duty.
all of these games. And there are sports, and there are leagues, and there is betting around it. It is the next massive explosion in betting, sports betting. It is esports, and along those lines, rather than just sit here and wax poetic about the old days for us, we thought that part of our goal here at Fifth Street Sports is to bring you the skinny in an entertaining fashion. Skinny is not a word I should use when referring to myself, but be that as it may. So we're very pleased to bring our first esports guest to the show. Cody Luongo from eSportsinsider joins us on our magical window. How are you doing, Cody?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, it's good. Thanks so much for joining us. You definitely look like an e-gamer.
He looks the part.
Yeah. You don't have that glazed over look though.
Yeah,
but
casting
that's good.
call was good, Nick.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it?
Boy, he's got the nice teeth and everything. He really looks like a winner at this thing.
Yeah. Hey, Cody, can we see those thumbs? Let's see those thumbs. Let's see him. That's Gamer's thumb, right? You see, look, he's got it right. hey, Cody,
I grew up with Gallagher too.
Yeah, you grew up with
guys
Gallagher
know.
as well. Nice, yeah.
Pac-Man.
And Pac-Man. I used to have a complete collection of vintage arcade games, the one I grew up with, but sold them off, and then the market boomed after I did that. Could have killed myself, and then it's crashed now, but that's okay. Let's as an aside, Cody, you and I spoke a little bit before this interview, and I was trying to sort of get a handle on the best way to describe esports to people that didn't know it. And I think the best analogy I would use would be if the Olympic Games is a sporting event, and there are tennis and soccer and track and field, and there's skiing and luge and all these sorts of other things in the winter. Esports is the same in that it would be like I would say the Paralympics, but I don't mean that in any form of disrespect. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a parallel set of sports, but they're played in the virtual world, whether it's Street Fighter or League of Legends or any one of these. Would you say that analogy is fair?
Yeah, sure. I mean, esports, I define it as a sport facilitated by an electronic system, a video game, i.e. And I think you're right. People will pigeonhole esports as just one thing, one game, when in reality it's multiple games which have different rules. The games are so different themselves, and also the communities. So when we talk about sports, yes, you have hockey, soccer, tennis, basketball, and then for esports you will have Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Dota, Halo. So I think that's an accurate way to put it. Yeah.
So Cody, what's the size of the market for esports right now in terms of dollars?
Are you just referring to gambling specifically?
Yeah.
Well, in the beginning of this year, Business Insider valued the esports betting market at $900 million, and that number is likely to have mushroomed since then. So it's a pretty sizable market at the moment.
That is a big market, and the people that are betting on esports. I mean, is this millennials? Is this old guys like us that like to bet on things and figure we have an edge? I mean, who are the people right now that are out there actually putting down their hard-earned dosh on these matches?
Well, the demographic for esports is typically males between 18 to 30, and I'd say that in that window is primarily where most of the betting is coming from.
That isn't very interesting.
Because Nick, I'm curious about one thing. One tie into Las Vegas. They've opened up. Cody, I want to ask you something about. They've opened up vast arenas now.
Yeah, the
like
Luxor,
stadiums,
downtown Grand. I mean, they got some big.
Right. I think the Luxor. They have these tournaments, and they're filling these vast auditoriums with thousands of people who are watching this as a not just gambling exercise, but they're fans, and it's almost a sport. Can you discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a spectator sport. It's something that is incredibly exhilarating to watch. I mean, just like some of you may like to watch baseball or soccer played at the professional level. I mean, right, that's fun for everybody. I played soccer my whole life and I watched it on TV. So playing these games like Halo and Call of Duty, the things that I used to play, watching them being played at the premier level and seeing people do things that you can only dream of doing is just incredible, and it's exciting, and it's packaged in a way that is very exciting with, you have really knowledgeable commentators that are intellectual and have fantastic insights. And the way it is produced and presented to the fans is fantastic. And I haven't had the opportunity to go to the Luxor Arena, but I've seen pictures and it looks fantastic. I mean, it's a brand new sport, and the way that they're building up and presenting it in that fashion is really hitting it on the head, I'd say.
So, Cody, what would you say some of the major tournaments are that we're looking at for esports over the year? And again, it's like saying, well, you got the World Cup and you got the World Series and you've got the NHL playoffs because each one's a different sport. But there are certainly some sort of quote unquote majors that stand out. What would you say those are?
Right. Well, for example, this from the 18th to the 22nd of this month is the DreamHack Marseille Masters for Counter-Strike, and that's a huge tournament. And sometimes it depends on the actual game, but the tournaments sort of rank from major to minor, and that there's different what's the word I'm looking for? Different
Tiers?
basically, yeah, like divisions is the word I'm looking for. So there's so many tournaments that happen. One of the biggest ones for Dota is the international. I think last year the prize pool was 27 million, around that number. So that's a huge tournament. This one in France right now for Counter-Strike coming up is going to be huge, and we have a lot of odds markers putting out odds for that, and people are going to place bets on outright winners.
You know, one thing I wanted to ask Cody. Cody, in this competition with esports, is there any kind of, you know how when you're playing chess, there's really not too much luck involved? Is there any kind of like short-term luck involved in the game? Like he draws a certain screen or he draws a certain position where he can get lucky? Like, you know, even though an inferior poker player could catch two runners or something, is there any luck involved at all?
It depends on the game. So I'm not an expert in all of them, but I'd say that typically most of the games are level and fair. And I mean, if you have a game that involves too much luck, then it's most likely not going to be an esport.
Oh, okay.
Right, it's very much player skill, right? I mean, that's really
Yeah. Can I ask a
Yeah.
question
Yeah,
about why one player would be Cody? Why one player would be favored in a market or a specific game versus another? And I know this is going to sound like, again, one of these old people's questions, but you see a lot of. If I were to see 3 or 4 people like yourself, you've obviously spent many years crafting your expertise in specific games. Why would somebody go off at 7-1, another fella 12-1, another at 20-1? Explain what would give someone an edge.
It's based off, previous tournament results. These players are practicing online all the time, and one of the advantages of esports is that you can stream their practices on Twitch, so people can see how they're playing, how they're stacking up against other teams, and obviously, they participate in leagues leading up to tournaments. So, example for Halo right now, there's the Halo World Championship, and leading up, they're doing online competitions constantly and playing each other. The top players are playing each other leading up to them, so you can see how teams stack up. And will do, and obviously there's things like roster changes that was really predominant in Counter-Strike right now.
So I think that's a really important piece of this equation, is that it's very rare that you're going to just bet on Joe Bloggs to win against Frankie Smith. You're betting on teams usually that have a roster of players. So just like you would bet on Liverpool or Manchester United, you're going to bet on Team Echo Fox, which is actually a team that's owned by former NBA player Rick Fox, whose son is on the team, and a bunch of other teams. So and those teams themselves might field a CS:GO team. So Team Echo Fox might have a CS:GO team. They might field a Street Fighter team or whomever. So there's a lot more kind of the stable that you come out. It's a cross between sort of team sports and the old Roman gladiatorial games in many respects. I mean, which gladiator school you came out of, might affect how well you perform in the arena. Yes, I know. I have some of those tickets, by the way. It's amazing. I always bet on the Macedonian. I don't know. But also coming into the sport, Cody, are lots of big time A-list top tier sponsors, and that seems to be really driving a lot of the growth of it right now from a business perspective.
Absolutely, sponsors are huge for esports. I mean, not all we got, but it is a massive portion about it. It probably amounts for, I read something recently that said it amounted to probably 50% of the revenue or something insane like that. Wow. And there's big name sponsors. The list goes on, but it's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Snickers, Geico sponsored a Super Smash Bros. Highlight series. You have Red Bull, who's been in esports since 2007. So you have so many prominent names that are jumping in on this because there's a lot of opportunity and exposure for the top players and teams and games.
That's fascinating stuff, Cody. So let's turn our attention to actually betting on esports. And we just scratched the surface today in this discussion. We're going to get into this a lot more. Hopefully, with Cody will be joining us more to talk about it. But there are places you can go to put bets on esports. There are lines available. I believe Bet Any Sports has some esports lines available, and maybe Boggs can put up for our viewers. There's a special. We have a special right now. If you go to Bet Any Sports,
it's amazing.
BetAnySports.com, and you sign up right now and you use the code FISTREET. Well, you can kind of see it there. You use the code FISTREET. You can get a bonus on your deposit of up to $500 bonus. So you could deposit up to $1,000. They will give you $1,500 to play with, which is there you go, which is a pretty astounding thing when you think someone's going to give you a lot of free money to play with.
You can deposit $2,000 and get $3,000. The bonus is good for $1,000. Not on. It's $1,000 bonus.
Oh, so you're just correcting me?
No, well, I'm just looking at the thing, and I know the guy who runs it.
He's reading the thing.
And I know the guy who runs it too. So
and reduced juice, which we talked about. Talk about a huge thing for a gambler.
So look at this for a gambler. For $2,000, he'll make it look like $3,000. Plus, you're laying $1.02 in soccer, $1.02 in overnight baseball, $1.05 in reduced juice, versus no bonus and laying $1.10 in most places. That's gigantic.
Yep.
So,
but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that is gigantic. Absolutely. So Cody, when we had spoken before the show a little bit to try and get some background on this, how many of the folks that are betting on esports right now? How savvy gamblers are they? Sports bettors. How savvy of a sports bettors are they, or are these just kids that have been playing the game and seeing the teams and feel they know how people are going to do, deciding to wager some money? Because, we're talking about reduced juice and overnights and all this sort of stuff. How technical is the betting right now on esports?
Right, that's an excellent question. I'd say that it varies. I've gone onto Reddits. Obviously, Reddit, and there's specific betting Reddits. That'll say, okay, place your predictions for this CS:GO match, this League of Legends match. And, people will get really in-depth talking about, how are the teams matching? What are the previous results? It can be extremely detailed and in-depth.
That's what I wanted to ask him. Cody, what I was going to ask you is, okay, since you said there's not too much randomness, like the best player is going to be the best player almost every time. For betting wise, do they handicap it? Like, do they give you, let's say I played against you where you would crush me straight up in a certain game. But if you looked at 20 of our games, you might give me 18.5 or 20.5. Is that how they level it out for betting? To make it.
I think I misunderstood your question at first because I thought you were asking me if there's a mechanic of randomness in the game itself, which there's not. So there is opportunities for people for upsets. That's totally not.
There is. But what can cause an upset? Just like the human player, like he's tired, or
it's a team sports.
It's team sports. Okay. But if one team.
You're asking for.
Right, but if one team is clearly better than the other team, let's say all the players, then there's no randomness. Do they offset it by putting a certain margin, like you got to win by this many or that many to make the betting fair, like a point spread?
Yeah, they have. There's multiple ways you can bet on games like League of Legends, for example. They'll have the team to destroy the first tower or first kill, first blood. And then they'll write who wins match one, who wins the group stage, and then who wins the game outright. There's hundreds of different ways to bet on it, which is really makes it very interesting.
That's interesting.
That is pretty fun. That is pretty fun. So there's in-game betting as well, I take it. So is that correct?
You bet online. You don't bet in the games themselves.
No. I don't mean in game. I mean while the game's going on, you can actually bet during the game as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
Can I ask something about the future of esports? And Mike, I'd like to bring you into this discussion because you've been around and you've seen, comparatively speaking, you've seen, for lack of a better word, a phenomenon. You've seen, I'll give you some examples. Cody, this is going to go to you next after Michael. So be on the lookout for this. We saw this amazing explosion in poker around 2004, 5, 6, the moneymaker effect, and this kind of everybody that was 17, 18, 19, 20 was playing poker 10, 12 years ago. Well, you don't have that anymore. And about 5 years ago, what did we have? Daily fantasy sports. Yeah. We had a lot of really, really smart people like Cody out there just killing it. Then they kind of squeezed, it obviously DFS is in a state of flux right now, but we saw again a flash in the pan and kind of a fade. My question to you, Mike, you've been around for a while, you've comparatively seen what's gone on with these kind of things. Is esports here to stay, and how do you see it in the future?
Yeah, I think Cody could answer that better than me, but I definitely think that the market is ready for something new, and I personally think that this probably is going to be the next big thing. I don't know much about it. I am curious to know which part of the world produces the best players.
That's an excellent question. It actually depends on the game. So there are, for example, in StarCraft, they have long-standing the best players, no question about it. But they also have an advanced infrastructure where if a
who's
kid,
that?
South Korea?
Oh, is that Korea?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
South and North. So
I'm sorry, North Korea too? They play? No, really. North Korea plays this? I didn't know that. Is that true?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, wow, I didn't
So,
even
like-
think they had internet there.
So, like, what would be like another country on another game that dominates?
Halo, North American and Halo players.
Oh, okay. See, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So it really depends. I mean, on the game, it's interesting, but like, for example, in Korea, they have such an advanced infrastructure where if a kid shows promise in this game at an early age, they will take him out of school and put him into a gaming house where he will practice against the best players.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, what a dream if I would have been a kid, right?
Yeah.
Here, son, drop out of school and play Pac-Man.
Yeah, could you imagine? Could you imagine? You could wake up in a perfect world. It's son, your third grade Kichichi comes son. Steve wins here.
That's unbelievable. Really, Cody, like they will actually take a kid out of school and put him into like a esports playing farm or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a gaming house essentially. So they have coaches. They will get paid. Literally, people that are putting them on a regiment, a schedule, and they are practicing with the best players and starting at such a young age that they are able to just achieve this incredible level of skill and talent.
God, if you told me at 16 that I could not go to school, I could do nothing but play video games. 16,
the way Cody sounds, they might be doing it at 10 or 11.
Now I have a 9-year-old, and I thank God that he's at a play date right now, and not hearing this. Because if he did, that'd be the end of it. Lock himself in his room.
He's going to play to South Korea.
Going to wait for the knock at the door, right, from some South Korean.
I've grown up in this town. Nick, could you just imagine if 40 years ago your dad said, "Okay, listen, I want you to drop out of school, play video games. We're going to legalize marijuana. We're going to do this," and you would have thought you were on Mars or something.
Oh, by the way, we're going to have a reality star as a president. Okay, sounds great.
Right.
Who would have guessed?
That's right. But one thing listen now, guys, about Donald Trump. Just think about this, okay? Here's a guy that is worth just real quick, worth billions of dollars.
Supposedly.
Goes out with has whatever, paid a porn star $150,000 something to sleep with her. He's got a wife 35 years younger than him. Built 20% of the high rises in New York, and now he's president of the United States. So if you ask a guy, what is it? I would say, that's like Batman. That's like a superhero to like a guy. I mean, just think like if they told you, hey, you're going to do all those things and then be president, you would think it was Spider-Man or something. That's superhero for a guy.
Well, we have another word for it, but I'm not going to use it on the air. All right, Cody, let me just, before we got rudely interrupted by that Trump supporter on the other side of this room, Cody, I'm real curious about something. I'm fascinated with your No, I really mean this. I'm fascinated with you kind of have a worldly view on not just the thing that you're passionate about, but a worldly view. And I am curious about your background and what drew you to this, and what made you into kind of a superstar of this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I studied communications, broadcasting. I got my master's of science in that, and I was studying theory as well. And I was just always super interested in video games and pro gaming. I used to watch the Halo broadcast when I was 15, 16 years old for until they ended Halo. MLG dropped them. But it's just such a fascinating thing because you look at these players. Like, I used to compete locally, and I would get my butt kicked, like, no problem. But I would crush people online, and you start to think, what makes someone so much better than another in this? You know what I mean? And there's a lot of theory to it. It is certainly a sport, in my opinion, because it requires teamwork, patience, practice, energy, just like all the real core elements that you need in a sport to play. And I'm just I'm super passionate about it.
And that's fascinating, Cody, and it brings up another great discussion. And Nolan, this is a discussion that I think you and I have had over numerous occasions. I know while I was heavily involved in the World Series of Poker, it was a discussion I had all the time. Is this a sport, or is this a pastime, or what is this? And I would always say, it's a sport. It's not an athletic endeavor, but it's certainly a sport. It's not a sport involving athletics or athleticism, but it is sporting in terms of the competition. It's a sporting competition is how I would put it. And I think, along those lines, you could say there are other things similar. Poker, bridge, which is a team game in many respects, right? Although there's a lot more element of randomness to it. But
race car driving. That's if you think about
race car driving, you have to be an athlete to drive a race car.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
What about the G-forces that are put in your body as you go around
You
the
try
turns?
getting in that car
this
for
is the thing
3
about,
hours.
What about hand-eye coordination, and isn't that kind of the same?
No, but but that's what I was going to ask Cody. Cody, is there a thing now when you're playing team against team? You know how like in the Olympics there's the 800-meter relay team,
Right.
where they pass the baton to 4 different guys. Is there such a thing like when you're playing team sport that a certain player is good in this stage and another player is good in that stage, and you line your teams up like that?
Yeah, sure. I can't speak for every game because I don't know. There's probably about 20 esports right now, and knowing the intricacies of all of them is almost impossible. But I can say in games like Call of Duty, you have people that are fraggers that will go into the rooms first, or people that are more objective players
Right.
when you're playing game types like capture the flag or sabotage, search and destroy, things with objectives. So you have different people that like to play different roles.
Right. So then a team could have like a guy that's great in these 2 departments and this stage and that stage. And then obviously there's a strategy to aligning your best players at their best part of the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
I'll tell you firsthand, watching Halo professionally back in the day, and now with Halo 5, you have a certain player pick up a sniper rifle, and your heart sinks. You think, oh man, this is about to get really interesting because the sniper's in his hands.
Okay. I got you.
Hey, Cody, so I'm curious about when you're playing these games, and suppose you're off the clock. I mean, and you probably have buddies that are on other teams, right? In poker and even in football, the players, they hang out with each other and they're friends with players in other teams. I'm curious about trade secrets. Like it seems like everything you do in esports is open. It's an open book. Everyone can see what you're doing. It's again like chess in the sense of there's no secrets. Not like you can't see the cards or what someone does. So given that this is a game of complete information in a sense, is there such a thing as a trade secret? And when you're parting with your buddies or discussing things with other teams, would you keep anything private? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's strategies in certain games. Again, it's so different amongst every game and community. For example, in Halo or Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, you might have a specific way that you like to break out. It's like there is like an A, B, and C to each way you start a game. It's A trumps B, B trumps C, and C trumps A. So you have to pick one of those and hope that they're not going to counter pick you, right? Essentially, in theory.
Like rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, that's
Except, in situations, there's 20, 25 different options for each way to start a match, or which way to enter a base to capture a flag. So there's a very heavy psychological aspect to these games. It's like I consider it to playing chess with your mind, except you're playing it really fast. You have seconds to make decisions.
But you know what I think, Nolan? Like you touched on something. Okay, you said like when Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker, because I was in poker all my life here. That opened it up big, and then the World Series, and it got huge for not 8 or 9 or 10 years. Now it's starting to go to regress a little bit. You know, people are getting a little bit not so interested in stuff. Now, I think in this esports, and I was going to ask Cody, if this market, like, do you think that this market has a huge more growth potential? Versus like it's not on the downside, like poker's on the downside. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Okay. Because I think that this thing can keep exploding for so much longer because you don't have to be an athlete. You know, you don't have to run like the mile in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. There's younger kids, you know, doing it. It's very interesting. This might be like a 20 to 30 year growth market
I'm
here.
sorry, I don't agree with you.
know?
And again, Cody, I'll go to you next, or Mike, if you have an opinion. I really want to hear this. I don't agree with you, and here's why.
Okay.
Because when people saw Moneymaker win in 2003, or whoever,
Right.
you know, playing poker,
Right.
a lot of people my age or even older, or people from different, didn't even speak English, they would see this and they'd think, that could be me. I could be that guy next year.
Okay.
I could be the person who wins the World Series of Poker.
Yeah.
And you have this anticipatory dream that can be fulfilled. All you need is the bankroll to come to Las Vegas, enter, put your chips in the pot, and play. Everyone above the age of 21 has that. It's an equalizer.
Right.
The problem that I have with esports, and again, I'd like to be proven wrong here. I want to hear a counter opinion. But the problem is, I see guys like Cody, and I'm thinking, I'm intimidated as hell. I don't want to sit down and play with that. I'll play against Phil Ivey, but I don't want to play with him for any. I'm going to get crushed. So I think that people that are over a certain age probably are going to be deflated before it starts.
But Nolan, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I think that that's a very similar argument that many people, particularly women, were making in the early days of the poker boom. You know, they were feeling intimidated to sit at tables with professional players. Many people are still intimidated to sit at a poker table with, you know, Phil Ivey. I mean, who wouldn't be? I mean, you know, he's an intimidating poker player, okay, to many people. So there are a few people that are full of themselves that think they can play with anybody and end up that they can. Tom Dwan, a great example. I mean, young guy, came up through the internet boom, become, you know, widely considered one of the top tier poker players out there today, right? But there are many people that are really intimidated sitting down at tables with top level poker players, and yeah, that's the fun of it, and that's what makes it attainable and achievable and opens the sport up to everybody. But there are many people that are still intimidated. All right, well, what we're going to do is, Cody, want to thank you for coming on. We're going to chat to you next week. We'll be back on network radio next week, and we'll have you join us.
Cody, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Great.
I can't wait to have more of these
gentlemen.
discussions with you. Cody Luongo from eSports
Insider.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Cody.
you.
There you go.
All
Thank
right.
you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to take a break and take a breather, stretch around a little bit, and we'll come back with more, along with a nice chat with Mike Shackleford, because I got a lot of video poker questions for you, Mike.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Thank you. You know what? I was just thinking about it, Nick. If you were playing 10 play
Yeah.
at the
the show. Fifth Street Sports, Nick Geber, Nolan Dalla, Frank Perez. Special guest Mike Shackleford from Wizard of Odds joins us. Welcome to hour number 2 of our first of our video podcast shows, which is a little different feel today. I'm really enjoying it. It's very relaxed. Don't have to worry about commercial breaks and having producers in network headquarters yell in your ear and all this sort of stuff. It's a lot more fun. So while we're here, there's a few things. Mike, I really have to talk to you about video poker. We're going to get to that in just a minute. There were a couple of things that really incensed me, guys, and I wanted to go over them with you. We talked earlier in the first hour about MGM buying Win. We kind of didn't finish the discussion, but it'll be ongoing, right? And Nolan, in the last segment, you were discussing with Cody Luongo from eSportsinsider the sort of, is this a fad? Is this a phase? Is this the next big thing? You mentioned poker. Of course, we all remember that very well. You then mentioned daily fantasy sports. Talk about esports. It's interesting because daily fantasy sports sites, most of them are getting ready to transition into sports betting sites. I don't know if you guys have heard that or read that. As we prepare for the Supreme Court's decision, which seems, on balance of experts, that it's going to be a fairly, shall we say, adamant decision on behalf of states' rights to regulate sports betting, which is about bloody time, but that's a different matter. So then I'm reading around and preparing for this, and look, much like all of these things that come to pass, it becomes a great money grab. We talk about online poker, and Mike, you were involved in the Absolute Poker scandal, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. I was heavily involved in those sites myself. Daily fantasy sports, they had their scandals as well.
Sure did.
And look, it's inevitable. But one of the things that really bothers me are these big sports, the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. Let's talk about the big four, even though there may actually be possibly 5 or even 6 big sports leagues, but they don't get mentioned in that discussion. Along with my absolutely least favorite organization on the face of the planet, short of either the North Korean government or perhaps the Republican Party, we're talking about the NCAA, of course. All of a sudden, the hypocrisy of these bastards just comes to the surface, and they just show themselves as being the abject hypocrites that they are. They all want a piece of this now. The players' unions have also jumped into the fray, and they want a piece of it. And they're all talking about how they need a 1% here and a 0.25% there to help the quote-unquote integrity of the game.
An integrity fee.
An integrity fee. And, I'm thinking, what bullshit is this? Integrity is up to you. It's not, nobody gives you money to, you can't buy integrity. Integrity is instilled in the game. These players are making, in the case of the NFL, what's the minimum base NFLs? I know their contracts are not guaranteed, but the minimum salary thing in the NFL is $600,000. I know in Major League Baseball, where the salaries are guaranteed, the numbers are even higher than that. The NHL is not too far behind, guys. The players are making a lot of money once they get to that level. Let's be honest. They don't need to have their piece of the gambling. Because sports betting is what happens outside of the sport. It has nothing to do with them. It's what consenting adults, people with free will, and the right to exercise that free will, choose to do amongst themselves.
You know what it reminds me of, Nick? It's like when you go into a bar. You just nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. When you go into a bar, and you're NFL Sunday, and you order however many Budweisers, should the NFL get a piece of the Budweiser, the bill?
No, they'd like to.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And, they talk about integrity this and integrity that. Well, what I would suggest is, if they're so worried about integrity, they've got a problem that has nothing to do with sports betting. They've got a real problem of their own that has nothing to do with whether Nolan, you or I should go and place a bet at betandesports.com, which you should do immediately, by the way, on hearing this message. But it incenses me. And then, of course, the NCAA pipes up. Now, they are not even for an integrity fee. They just don't want it. Now, I will give them this much for the NCAA. At least they have been consistent in their position. But for me personally, an organization that rakes in billions of dollars. I don't know how much TNT pays for the college basketball series. It was, I think it was $1 billion over 5 years. It was an absolutely astounding amount of money. College football generates enormous quantities of money. Okay, albeit for the sort of top tier, AAA bowl teams, the SEC primarily, right? Those teams are raking in those universities raking the dough. But this is slave labor they're on. I mean, these kids don't get paid crap for putting this out there. They potentially suffer life-threatening, career-ending injuries at the end of it. Only a very small percentage of them actually make the big leagues, the major leagues, where they can enjoy those base salaries. And all of a sudden, if the NCAA said, look, we approve of sports betting and we want a 0.25% athlete's fee in that money so that we can actually afford to supplement it so it's no longer just scholarships, it's now a living wage for paying, well, I might actually approve of that. I might actually think, well, maybe that's not a bad idea. But then I think, well, you're making so much money, you cheap bastards, maybe you should give it them out of your coffers and not have to give it them out of my coffers. But they don't, of course. They just don't want it because they're worried about the integrity of the game. Guys, this gets me hot under the collar, gets me PO'd. I hate it. I can't stand it. These people need to keep their hands. It's nothing to do with them.
I know, but Nick, now this is my position on their side where you got to be careful. Here because you nailed it. Here's an 18, 19-year-old kid that can hit a great jump shot and so whatever. He's not going to get paid nothing. So when you have a sport like college basketball, okay, now you have a kid, let's say in a real minor school like Siena or Quinnipiac or something. In college basketball, it's so easy for that kid to approach a 19 or an 18-year-old kid, say, here's $20,000. You guys are favored by 14.5 tonight. Just win, but don't get near the 14.5. Win by 6 or 8. Now here's one kid, a 19-year-old, that tells his buddy, man, we just made 20 grand. Let's just win. But, if we're up by 18 or 20, just throw it out of bounds a couple times and we win by 12. Everybody's happy. Nobody knows nothing. But for betting-wise, you took the 14.5, you win. It's very easy to do that. You can't do that on an NFL level. There's no fixed games. Even in college football, you couldn't do it because, let's say I was the linebacker for Ohio State and my other buddy's the safety for Ohio State.
Right.
And we're going to try to play bad. That doesn't guarantee anything. The coach is going to see 8 or 9 plays and say, hey, what are you doing? Are you drunk today? And get you off the field.
Very difficult to do, would agree.
But meanwhile, I play for Marist, and I'm the power forward. And my other buddy is a great guard, a shooting guard. And we're favored by 16 against another school. We just look at each other and just say, wow, you guys, they just gave us 30 grand. We can win the game. Nobody knows nothing. Let's just win by, keep it under 9 or 11 or 12. And nobody knows anything. Yeah. Very tempting to a kid.
By the way,
it is.
I have to ask it. By the way, phenomenal opening rant, Nick. That was epic. I'm going to give you. I give you an A-. I mean, very
what?
very.
A minus. A minus.
What's wrong with you? Where's the rest of it? I mean, come on.
No, you get A+ is only an A. That's reserved for epic. That was
That's when I really foam at the mouth.
It was very close. It was very. Yeah, I want to see
So
not enough F-bombs.
What do you think, Nolan?
My question is this on you, Frank, because you made a very, very interesting kind of counterpoint. Right. Mike, you're going to come in next with the same answer the same question, so I'm going to put you on in the warm-up deck here. Do you think that NFL games are not fixed? I agree.
No.
Do you think that occasionally there are some college basketball games that are not on the square?
Well, remember they had that scandal with Boston College. I think it was in the 60s or the 70s.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Is that just the tip of the iceberg?
I think most of the games, or almost all the games, are kind of be on the square. But once you legalize gambling, and now it's I'm sure they're aware of point spreads and all that. Now you legalize it and you make it a huge market. These kids might get approached that aren't getting anything. And like you said, here's a kid that plays for Marist. He ain't gonna make the NBA. He ain't gonna make no money, okay? But all of a sudden he can find 4 or 5 games a year to win, but not win by that much, and pick himself up 80 or 100 grand, keep it quiet. Very tempting.
There is actually a way around this. I'm sorry, Mike, I see you're ready to interject. So go right ahead.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, I think that the business will have less integrity if the professional sports are trying to skim off of the profits of it. And point shaving, is already a potential problem. I don't think that expanding the market is going to increase or decrease it.
Okay.
And furthermore, I think that at least for the recreational gambler, he's just as likely, if there is if the game is fixed, to pick the right side as well
Could
as
go
the
one way
wrong
or the
side. So it doesn't keep me from
No,
betting
no,
on it.
no. But that last. I mean, you're probably correct on all that last part. I disagree with because it's like in a horse race. You know, if the race is fixed, who knows if you got lucky and picked the one that was going to automatically win anyway. But not in that because it's not random. Because if a team is minus 14, that lines makers made them minus 14. And now these kids that are like on the team that's minus 14, they can't say, let's play great today and we're going to win by 20. They don't have that kind of control, but they have the control to say, let's win by 6 or 8. They don't have that. So if you picked a team that was minus 14 and they were not going to play that well, you had no chance. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to, I mean, like if you took the team minus 14, you have no chance. You know what I mean?
Well, I'd like to suggest the key thing with this topic is transparency.
Yep.
And one of the things that, really the most recent scandal in college basketball was Arizona State, maybe 15 years ago or so. And one of the reasons the scandal was uncovered was it was inexplicable line movement. And the NCAA actually does, this is the whole thing. One way to have transparency is to have everything in the open. That's what it means, where you can see what's going on. And when you just have basically legalized sports betting in one state, which is Nevada right now, we're talking about with the Supreme Court potentially opening up to all 50 states in the District of Columbia. That'd be like huge. Does that foster transparency? Obviously, the answer is yes, because you have regulatory bodies in all states, all gambling jurisdictions that oversee this and will watch for situations like Arizona State or Manhattan back in the 50s, the famous CUNY, City University of New York. That was the most famous one in the early 50s. And college basketball has been rampant with this kind of stuff ever since its inception. And so the only way that you can identify line movement that doesn't make any sense. Why is Arizona State open at 7 and it closes at 12.5 and there's no injury? Why is everybody betting Arizona State or the opponent, whoever it is? I mean, why? So the best way to do that is to have legalization, regulation, and transparency. Agree, Mike?
100%.
Just like prostitution. I agree with you.
Well,
Legalization, regulation.
That's an interesting comparison. I think the problem is people get caught up in the moral. Moral
Well, that's the
gambling
problem, right?
gambling is evil. Drinking is all these things are evil. But you're quite right that the more who out there that's listening to my voice now and all four of us here on this panel, who is opposed to having more information, to knowing more about what's going on, and getting back to your the point you made early was. The sports leagues are now expressing this extremely hypocritical position that is purely motivated not by morality
by money
or ethics, but by money.
They want that piece. They want that piece. Like they don't make enough already. Okay, and they're trying to now put their hands into the pocket of what we do outside of the sport. Look, it's bad enough already that you can't call the Super Bowl the Super Bowl. I mean, you have to call it the big game if you're going to do anything. I'm going to have a match.
Explain that more for people who don't know what's.
Look, you and I sitting around the table, we can call it the Super Bowl. If we're on this show right now, we can call it the Super Bowl because you know what we're talking about. But if I want to advertise for my mattress store that I'm going to have a Super Bowl sale, I can't do that because the NFL owns the trademark of the Super Bowl. Actually, it was owned by the Hunts, old man Hunt, right, was the guy that created the name Super Bowl.
NHL Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right. By the way, I had an
opportunity. Lamar Hunt, excuse me.
Lamar Hunt. I had an opportunity, just as an aside, to actually interview him when I was doing World Soccer Daily because he was very involved in the growth of soccer in this sport. And I have to say, a more charming Southern gentleman I have never met.
He owned the Dallas Tornado.
Yes, he was an absolutely
NASL.
lovely, lovely man. But and rest his soul, he's departed. But yes, the NFL owns the trademark of Super Bowl. So if I've got a mattress store, I have to have the big game. It's silly, guys. It's ridiculous. They're making hundreds and millions of dollars off the Super Bowl. And what is one of the prime drivers that they're getting the international views of the Super Bowl that they do? It's sports bettors. It's people laying money on the game. And that's the interest of it. And they're making money because now all of a sudden they've got ratings in Belgium and in the UK and in Russia and all these other places where people largely couldn't give a toss about American football, to be quite honest with you. But they love to bet on it. It's a wonderful sport to bet on. It's created almost perfectly for it. And so now they've got all these new eyeballs on it, all these new ratings, and they're able to rake in the dough through sponsorship and being able to show their cum numbers and everything else. But now they want a piece of the gambling dollar after fighting it tooth and nail. Oh, by the way, you ready for the next level of hypocrisy here? They absolutely were dead set against the legalization of poker, which is outrageous to me that it would be somehow against the law for me to play poker with my friends as an adult, consenting adult who's in full control of my faculties, although my ex-wives may not agree with that. I should be up to me what I want to do with my money and my time. But the NFL, they were against it. They were against legalization of poker, against legalization of sports betting. Oh, but you know what? We're not against the legalization of daily fantasy sports because, oh, by the way, we own a piece of FanDuel. So we like that. That's fine. We like that. The hypocrisy, guys, it makes me want to throw up.
And believe me, that's gambling.
Yeah, please don't throw up. First of all, Nick. Okay.
Yeah.
But let me run.
Mike really doesn't want me to throw up.
Let me ask you something on this. And because of the way you try to talk funny, I'm going to guess you're not from this country.
No.
Okay. So it's not as though that there isn't historical precedent on this. It's not like we can't look at what a legal scholar would say, case law. You know, how does this work when you have legalized sports betting in a country, in a jurisdiction, in a region, in a city, in a whatever? England is the perfect example of a situation that works, yes?
Yeah, we've had legalized sports betting since long before I was born. They've got corner bookies, the corner bookmakers. You know, William Hill started as a local corner bookshop, basically, you know. And it's fine. It's there. We have legalized poker. We have legalized this. Now, it still might be a repressive country, and it may have a very high tax rate. It may be, very expensive to live in, but it hasn't affected the integrity of the game. There are places where where games have been affected by gambling. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. If you're a fan of Italian soccer, and I am, by the way, I love to watch Italian soccer. I mean, you're lucky to get a year where there isn't a big betting scandal.
That's gambling.
Point shaving, teams throwing games, referees being bought by strange Czechoslovakian people with with big bankrolls. But that's inherent. The point is, it's inherent in the league itself to police its own, and this is where I'm going with this. The NFL, as you pointed out, Nolan, polices itself very nicely, okay, and continues to do it. And the NFL is a very well-run organization. The NBA is the same way. The NHL is the same way. They can tell when something fishy is going on in their sport. They don't need 1 point out of my pocket, out of my gambling dollar, which would make it so expensive for real gamblers who actually want to lay lots of bets, right? To have to pay that sort of expanded juice, right, for it. It doesn't make sense. But the NCAA is a different matter, and I do understand what you're saying with small colleges that people bet on. Maybe once it's legalized, the sad side of it is maybe you just don't allow the small schools like that for people to bet on those games.
No. You could still watch.
No, I'm just putting that out as a possibility.
But Nick, you're absolutely right about one thing. The NFL, I don't think they're stupid enough to know that if there was no gambling or fantasy football, who's going to watch the Browns and the Bengals on Thursday night?
Exactly.
I mean, get out of here with these things. I think that the legalized betting nationwide, especially of NFL, they don't need to take a piece of it. Their viewership is going to skyrocket just because now everybody at the 7-Eleven can bet 11 to win 10 on St. Louis tonight. It's going to be so exposed. They're going to get a free market driven to them.
And they know it.
They know it, yeah.
Now, so why do they want a piece of the revenue? They're going to get it automatically by viewership.
Come on.
By the way, I have to interject something that there's been some breaking news on this very week, which I think is somewhat notable. The head of the PGA has come out. The golfing, essentially professional golf, has come out and said the NBA was Silver was the first Commissioner Silver was the first major sports league to say we We approve of legalized, regulated sports gambling. That was amazing by the way.
Yeah, he's a forward-thinking guy, by the way.
He sees the future. He's not caught like Togliboo and these people thinking it's still 1965. But the PGA recognizing that this is one potential fuel driver for greater viewership. Tiger Woods is on the other side of 40 now. Things like this you have to worry about with the future of the sport. What's one way to generate viewership in any sport, particularly golf, is people gambling on matchups, rounds, so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Masters was just last week, but by the way, the very fact that PGA has now endorsed this, that's a great...
I have a suggestion for the PGA, because you talk about that, and you're right. I mean, it's a little boring. I mean, it could definitely do with spicing it up. I might suggest lions. Why don't you just throw in some lions into the Masters, put
a lion on the course to run around and gobble up.
And now here's Tiger Woods.
Yeah, but it's not so boring.
Oh my goodness, his head's been ripped off by that giant lion. Now that would be really exciting.
Especially if you're betting against him.
No, but how about if you need a guy to make a 13-foot putt? Well, but let's say the guy's on the 18th and you need a 13-foot putt, to win that matchup or to win the tournament for $5,000 or $10,000. It's not so boring then.
No, it's never boring when you have action on the game. And
it's not. But I don't find golf boring. I was just
just bet enough on it. It won't get so boring.
But Mike, let me ask you something again. You've been around and so you've seen this whole thing from a broader perspective maybe than a lot of people. Let's suppose that gambling goes national. Legalized sports gambling on the NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, and so forth. What does that do when you have maybe every grandmother and grocer in America having $10 on a game? How does that help guys like you who bet for a living? I mean, talk about the implications and the upside, or maybe the downside, if there's such a thing, of mass gambling.
I think it'll be good for the professional gamblers because so much more square money will be coming into it that it creates opportunity for the sharp side.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little more? I'd like to hear a little more.
It's like poker, Nolan.
I'd like to follow up on this. So you're saying that everybody betting $10 on a game will does that really inflate? Does it really add up?
Yeah, I mean the general public likes the big name teams like the Patriots. They like the favorites. Most of the money will flow that way. So I mean everyone knows that the as a general rule you should bet the underdogs, and it's going to get even. There's going to be even more pressure on the favorites, creating more value for the underdogs. In my opinion, that's what will happen. I mean, that's why you get better values betting on the underdogs here in Vegas than you do offshore, because there's so much more square money bet here than there is at the internet casinos.
Yeah, well, let me again. You really are an authority on this. The Wizard of Oz odds is your site that you've been associated with for so long. We talk about a situation where a game has got a lot of money on one side, but say the number of actual individual bets will be on the other side. You know what I mean? Like all the $20 bettors are on one side, but the guys who are betting $1,000 and up are on here, and they're flooding. Can you talk about the disparity of that? And supposedly the smart money is the $1,000 bettors, right? Can you talk about that disparity and how the legalization of sports would create, it seems, a lot of $20 bettors that are kind of flooding that situation?
Yeah, I do think that you're going to see a lot of small bets on the favorites, on the big name teams, and it's all supply and demand. So the sports books will have to offer better values to attract money on the underdogs and the teams that nobody likes.
So the contrarians are the beneficiaries of that kind of thing.
Well,
yes. It's only going to be good to attract more square money into it for the sharp bettors.
You know what I thought was interesting is, let's say it gets legalized. I don't think Hawaii and Utah are going to go for it though. So you'll probably get 48 states and District of Columbia.
No, a lot of the southern states have come out saying, like Mississippi, that they don't want it.
Oh, okay. But let's say you get like 30 of them. Now, like Mike just mentioned over here, we know in Vegas, like usually the square bettors usually going to be on the favorite and over. So a lot of times we really find value here by taking the dog and really under. I wonder if in each state, though, so that's Nevada versus the sharp offshore. So all the values in Nevada because, we're taking the favorite and over here, so we find the value. I wonder if each state, though, is going to have their own particular thing. So then if let's say the Redskins are going to be -4 in Washington, but in Baltimore -4, but over here or Vegas or offshore has them 3. But because the bookmakers need to level out their action, like I'm going to get. The Falcons are going to be -6 in -7.5 in Atlanta. So let's bet the Falcons. Let's bet against the Falcons in Atlanta like that.
Question.
Like is each state going to have their own market? Because then you're going to find 48 Nevadas.
Well, this thing, but by the nature of this lawsuit, which is New Jersey, it's a New Jersey case that's before the Supreme Court. This is essentially before the court. The argument should state law supersede?
Yes,
and there's
that's
really no
ultimately
federal,
what it
except
is.
for the Wire Act. There's no federal and perhaps the you professional. You can't bet on professional sports.
Right.
This is essentially a case that affirms New Jersey's right to do its own thing. So I think if I'm not wrong on this, every state will essentially be self-regulatory and set its own lines. So you can bet the Falcons here and the Redskins there and get a 3-point bet.
All the sharp money's going to come in like
I'm not.
Great question.
I'm not a. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a psychic. I don't play one on a television commercial.
Yes, but you play video poker.
pen play, by the way.
But I would imagine that it's going to be similar to what they're trying to do right now with poker, where you can play intrastate poker. In other words, everyone in Nevada can play people in Nevada. And then when enough states with enough people legalize it, then they'll opt into a pool, and then you'll be able to play interstate poker, which is the model that they're going for. I would imagine that what's going to happen once legalization comes in is we're going to see a lot less state-by-state fragmentation, as you think, because I would have to think that the economies here are the economies of scale. And that the big bookmakers that are going to come in here and ultimately take over once it becomes legalized are not going to want to have 36 different lines. They're going to want to take all the people from those states and put them into my sports book, basically, because that's where they're going to make the most amount of money.
I'd like to take issue with what you just said very, very briefly.
What about not being a psychic?
Well, that too.
Okay.
I think that you're giving government and regulatory bodies and people that oversee these things a little more credit than maybe they deserve. And here's what I mean by that. Anytime I've seen government bodies anytime I've seen these kind of discussions before House subcommittees or when there was the Gambling Impact Study Commission and I saw testimony on that,
Right.
I was appalled at the lack of understanding about just the basics of gambling. Astounded, by the way.
Sure.
And by the way, and you're going to essentially, it's not as though they're going to put people like Mike or Frank in charge of regulatory bodies. They're going to have people, from the state police or who have no. What I'm suggesting to you is I think that there will be a window, at least for the first, before things kind of correct themselves. So I think
The
that you're
Wild
right in
West.
the long run.
Yeah.
But I do believe early on there's a big opportunity.
And there is huge opportunity in there. We'll have to wait and see how it unfolds. But it's a good discussion, and I'm happy to see us moving along that way. Let's take a quick 2-minute break and come back, and let's talk about one of my great loves and passions. Shall we? Okay.
What is that? What's your
great love and passion?
Liverpool Football Club.
Oh.
No. Talk
I
about
wore
video
this.
poker.
By the
And
way, I
Pygo,
what a
my
show
biggest
killer.
win ever, by the way.
What a
Mike.
show
I wanna
killer.
talk about that.
but he gave me so many winners last weekend on the show that I actually wore this.
That's right. 1966, England, the last time they won the World Cup. I was 1 year old, but I
wore it in his honor.
I remember it. But all right, let's go to break quickly. We'll be right back with more here. Fifth Street Sports coming to you live online. Nick Geber, Nolan, Dalla, Frank Perez, Mike Shackleton here with us, and we'll be right back after this.
But
Hey, can I check your lab?
Sure.
Welcome back to the show, by the way. Fascinating discussion while we took a little break. We didn't actually really take much of a break. Actually, the discussion continued.
The argument continued.
Well, it's not really an argument. I think, one of the things that I will agree with you, Nolan, is I'm always amazed at just how little our governments really know, whether it's state or federal, really know about many of the things that they sit up there and bang their gavel on in terms of legislation, and how much special interest groups really drive the content of that legislation.
Real quick sidebar. Did you see the testimony, the questions from Mark Zuckerberg this week? These 70, 80-year-old fossils that are United States senators asking Mark Zuckerberg about high tech. Did you see the questions?
I didn't see them.
Your jaw, the bottom of your jaw would be on the floor if you. These, by the way, these are the people. The head. They're on the Science and Technology Committee. And and shouldn't they know a little something about the internet?
The cotton gin.
And they're asking Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, science technology. I mean, they just discovered the cotton gin for a lot of people. So that's where they are.
Right? But Nick, you touched on something. It's like we never really argue. I mean, that if we were all Democrats, we would be arguing all the time because. If I asked you something or Mike or you and you guys gave me the opposite thing and it made sense to me and hey, wow, I wasn't right. I'm not going to argue. I'm going to say thank you very much. I got an open mind and I'm going to go with the right side, not like the Democrats. You could tell, you could give a Democrat the most unbelievable policy from healthcare or whatever, and you ran it through an IBM computer and it was perfect. They're still not going to vote for it, even though it's good for the country because they still want to be in power. So we never argue because you have a Republican here.
I just want to say one thing, Frank. You see that cat Juniper right
She
there?
loves me.
I have no idea what she sees in you, sir.
So I'm her favorite because she knows animals have an instinct.
Check her eyesight.
Look,
she's rather fond of you, Frank.
I read a very famous quote yesterday, right? Remember this quote went like this. You give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But you promise a man another man's fish and you have a Democratic voter.
All right, there we go. All right. I don't know what Juniper sees in you, Frank. It's probably because she's half Asian leopard and half.
She knows where the money
cat.
is.
That's what she knows what's going on. Yeah.
Animals know.
Money.
All right, guys. Well, let's bring the discussion back to one of my great passions, casino gambling, because I do have a great time doing it. There was a period in my life where I was gambling rather large numbers on video poker. I was mentioning 10 play. No, it's not now. It's not now. I'm at nickels and dimes. Okay, the bankroll has been substantially impacted by those years, 10, 12 years ago. No, there was a time when I was putting in a lot of money. I was playing 10 play double bonus video poker, primarily at the Rio and all the Harris properties while we were doing the World Series of Poker. And there were a few things that struck me. Number one is the number of people that play video poker and have no clue. For example, if I get 3 cards to, it is going to be 1 in 47 that I'm going to get the fourth one, or 1 in 48. I forget what them. If I get 2, it's 1 in 1,047.
I think it's a 1 in 1,081.
1,081. Close enough, right?
The Wizard of Odds corrects you.
Yes. Thank you. Well, that's why he's here, right? It's amazing to me the number of people that don't understand the game and the right way to play it, because it is a game of such thin odds and where you have to play the correct way. Look, you got your calculator out. Yeah. Excellent. I love that.
I was right.
1,081. You're
Oh
right.
my
I never
goodness,
believe me.
that's
I wouldn't have
terrific.
put any bet whether you were right because I knew once you corrected me, I knew I wasn't right. It's a terrific game to play, but you have to be smart. Now, I see all sorts of variations in the casinos, and I do play nickels and dimes now, so it doesn't matter if I'm not playing optimal strategy or whatever. I mean, I'm playing for the fun of it, right? And I did play with Chad, who was our technical guy that actually built this studio. He comes in from Utah, doesn't have much money, and we sat down at a super times pay triple play machine, and he actually got a 10 times multiplier and 4 to the royal, and did hit the royal, made $1,000 off a nickel bet of whatever that was, 18 nickels, right? But let's talk about some of those variation games, because there's super times pay, there's super times pay plus, there's aces bonus, there's all these crazy games. They're all stacked against you. They're all sucker games, I have to imagine. But they are fun. Well, are any of those games playable, or should they all be avoided?
They're not necessarily sucker games. It all depends on the choice of casino management. Super Times Pay, the odds are exactly the same given the same pay table. It just
3 more credits.
You're right. I stand
It's
corrected
18
there.
credits. It's 18 credits a line. It's 18 credits for 3 lines.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's true. You bet the it's more if you make the maximum coin bet, because the average multiplier, it's worth paying for it.
Scoreboard
So
is
I was thinking
one,
about
by the
something
way,
else. But yeah, but I am not going to say that the new novelty games are a bad bet. Lots of times, Super Times Pay is the best bet in a particular casino, and I would. And lots of times it's the oddball games like Dream Card.
Yeah.
That sometimes casinos will put in an errant pay table that's really generous. So I would not. Now with slot machines, I always say stay away from the big flashy, modern, Breaking Bad, Sex and the City games.
Buffalo.
But yeah, stick with the simple things like Buffalo.
Yeah.
But video poker, you just never know. And that's why I created my site. So I endeavor to cover every single possible video poker game there is out there, every single game within it, every single pay table, so you can know what the odds are.
Oh, that's really, really useful stuff.
So, Mike, you think sometimes with the super pay, it's worth that extra quarter or that extra unit versus to get the multiplier?
Yes, you absolutely should pay for the multiplier, because you will get, for example, if you have to bet a 6th coin to get it,
Right.
it's going to multiply your win by more than 20%. So you're betting 20% more, but it's like you get 3% of an average
but
multiplier.
it's totally random how often that multiplier comes
Yeah,
up.
and
Yeah,
it's
but
on
I see what
it's
you
on my site how often you get a multiplier and how often you get each particular multiplier, but it averages out to more than a 20% increase.
So, and just how do you get those numbers? Do you call them manufacturers? Because they have to be made public, right?
Actually, at first, for a while, the best game at the Venetian was Super Times Pay. They had Super Times Pay 9-6 jacks in the high limit room, and I played it a lot. And I tracked every single multiplier I got. So I had a pretty good estimate of the probability of each one, but then somebody at IGT just kindly gave me the actual probabilities of each one, so I posted it on my site. So now I have the exact average multiplier.
So here we're going. This is why you need to educate yourself if you're going to play these games, and know what the best games, the smartest games to play are. Double bonus is great. That's the staple game that I like to play. It gets a little boring after a while, and I like to play something like Deuce's Wild Bonus. Is that a decent game, or is that crap game?
It always comes down to the pay table. Is if you want the best possible odds, you have to look at every game and every pay table available to you and then play the best one. And if you don't want to do all that research, there's a great website called vpfree2.com, which endeavors to tell you the best games and pay tables and locations in every single casino in the United States. Now, they're not always completely up to date, and lots of times professional video poker players withhold juicy information from them.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it's a great starting point.
So if you're watching this and you're the uninitiated in video poker, I want to just touch on a couple of topics. Number one is 100% payback machines, or 99% payback. They're not going to give you four aces any more often than you would get otherwise. Those paybacks are result in things like the amount you get. They'll pay you more for the wins you're going to get more frequently, right? The higher frequency, whether it's full houses or straights or whatever it is, and that's where they adjust it. Correct?
Where they adjust it is in the pay table. First of all, there is a law in Nevada that any video representation of playing cards must be according to the natural odds, where every card has the same chance, and every single state, I believe, just adopts the standard. There may be some rinky-dink machines in Alabama or Maryland that do their own thing, but any state that has full-blown legal gambling, that has IGT machines, they do play fairly. What separates a tight machine from a generous machine is the pay table. For example, jacks are better. The best pay table that you're likely to find is 9-6, meaning a full house pays 9 and a flush pays 6, and it gets all the way down to 6-5, meaning the full house pays 6 and the flush pays 5, which is what you would see, say, at the Las Vegas airport.
Yeah. So that's the important thing. But then there are those machines that say, jackpot the progressives. Jackpot must hit by $2,000.
Yeah.
So what is there? Some trigger when it gets close to that on a random basis will automatically give someone a royal flush? Or
Okay, I call those mystery progressives, and the way those are supposed to work is they start it at a certain amount, say $250, and it must hit by 500.
Exactly.
And the closer it gets to hitting, the more likely you are to hit it, obviously. And the way most slot makers design it is that if it starts at 250 and must hit at 500, it's like picking a random number, equally distributed in that range, and that's where it'll hit. But I'm in the research process of this, and some makers don't make it random, that they always withhold it until the jackpot is close to being hit before they'll release it. That, I think, borders on cheating.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I agree.
am working on gathering evidence to expose this on my website.
Good. We're gonna. Oh, such good stuff. All right. So those machines, I avoid those machines because unless they're close to it, and then when they are, there's 1,000 old ladies sitting there, playing away, right? Especially if you go to South Point, which is a place, by the way, that I like to call the retirement home. If you ever watched The Walking Dead and you don't believe that it's real, just go down to South Point on the weekends. You will believe me. Trust me, the zombies are out. So video poker. So the specialty games are not bad. The other games I like to play, Pai-Gow. I did hit a 7-card straight flush with no joker on a Pai-Gow. Now that was very rare. I hit that at the Rio.
Well, congratulations, but I have to say these side bets are sucker bets.
I know, but I did hit 8,000 to 1 with $10 on the fortune bonus.
And he's still crowing about it.
Right. I've not hit anything at Pai-Gow since, and that was already 12 years ago. But, the side bets are the sucker bets, of course, because that should be a fairly 50-50 game. That's why they have commission in it, right? But what about the ones that are commission-free, but it's what they call it, the commission-free Pai-Gow, but if they hit a particular
I think that if the dealer has a queen high Pai-Gow, it's an automatic push.
Yeah, they change it. They all have different ones. I mean, is it better? Are you better off paying commission, or are you better off going with that one?
It really depends upon the exact rules, and it's done different ways. And my website has a whole page on commission.
Tiger 9, they call it. Yeah.
There's the Dragon 8 and the Dragon 7 and the Panda 8. Those are side bets that cover. I'm thinking of Baccarat. I'm sorry, but they do this. The casinos want to get rid of that commission because it slows down the game, and sometimes it results in payment errors. So they don't like commissions. So that's why they like this commission-free rule where everything is paid even money, but some wins turn into a push. But are the odds better or worse? It really depends on the exact rules. But in general, they're about the same. And the casinos make their money on the side bets with these things.
Right.
Just about every game is they. Like a $25 blackjack player playing even average strategy at a 1% advantage is not going to make a profit for the casino given all the cost of labor. So they count on the side bets for the money, and the base game is like a cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Another important thing to know. You mentioned poker. We mentioned poker. And talking about integrity of the games. I'm always surprised when we look back in the old days. And Nolan, you were there back in 1823 during the riverboat era, along with Doyle, by the way.
Let me tell you something.
There's a new scandal rocking the poker world. In terms of a site called America's Card Room. I don't know how familiar you are with ACR. And it's sort of the same sort of thing. They're fishy as to certain hands that are played, and when they look back. Because what happens is when you deal with a lot of highly intelligent people who are data and statistical oriented, and that have the ability to collect and accumulate and analyze data, particularly from your poker site, you better be prepared that there's some kid that's got plenty of time on his hands that feels hard done by, that's going to be and is absolutely convinced that there are aliens and Roswell was correct and that you're cheating, is going to run the numbers, and guess what? If you're cheating, he's going to find you. Now, that happened back in the day with Absolute Poker and Ultimate Poker, because they were both owned by the same people. And I was actually involved with both of them at the time. But that was two different scandals. One was some sort of God account somebody had where they could see the whole cards, right? And the other was some bots that were playing. What you were involved in that. Tell us about your involvement in that and how you uncovered the naughtiness.
Well, I think they were both involved with. It was a whole card scandal both times, and the same company. But I'm proud to say that I believe that I was the first public figure to make a public accusation that Absolute Poker was cheating. And I might be confusing that story with the Ultimate Bet story, but basically, there were tournament players that were just winning like crazy, and there were hand histories, and every time someone bluffed against them, they went in aggressively, and anytime they had the worst of it, they got out early. It was totally obvious that some players had knowledge of everyone's hole cards. And I posted a hand history and said, look, every single hand, it's just totally obvious. And of course, they denied it vehemently both times, but eventually they admitted it. So
somebody had a God account, an administrator account. Was
yes,
able to see.
yes. There was a good thing on 60 Minutes about this. Yeah, with Ultimate Bet, in the testing phase, there was some sort of a super account where you could see all the hole cards. And I still don't know all the details, but I think that an inside employee gave access to this all-knowing privilege to one of his friends, and he didn't just smooth it over at all. He just crushed his opponents, and in a totally obvious way.
And you know how foolish, Mike, you're so right, how greedy and stupid these guys are. Let's say, for instance, like you were saying, you can see everybody's hole card at all times. So these guys would, like you said, mathematically fold every time, the guy had a hand, or, call every time the guy was bluffing. They're so stupid that if you know somebody's hole card, it doesn't matter how long that you're going to win the money in the end. It might take you a few more hands, but you're supposed to, when you know you have the worst of it, call, bluff, just to give the variations. It can't be you can't catch the guy bluffing 88 out of 88 times and then you know what I mean? They weren't even smart enough to give some back.
You know what you're saying? Let the sucker win occasionally.
No, but
Absolutely.
even
You should own a casino.
It's the sheep thing.
No, but let the math.
You can shear the sheep 1,000 times, but you can only slaughter the lamb once.
But what I'm saying, Nolan, is that if a guy's running data like Mike did, and he says it's just too highly improbable that the guy can be right 288 times in a row, throw some data off. You know you're going to win because you can see the guy's
By the
whole
way,
cards.
Frank, is it greed or stupidity or
both?
It's all of it, all of the above. Every one
You've
of
got
these
the golden
guys.
goose there on this.
Yeah, it's
By the way,
mostly stupidity.
this is what's funny.
Exactly.
The people that were involved in these scandals that had the super user
Right.
accounts, I was like, this is everybody's kind of got this. How do you rob a bank? We're all a little bit nefarious. Let's just be quite honest. But it's like that's a
Speak for
dream
yourself.
situation for. It's a. And
Exactly.
how could you mismanage that? You could have milked that cow
That's
all
right.
the way to.
Yeah.
That's right. Just think if you could see somebody's whole cards and you're playing them gin or something heads up, you're going to win all the money in the end. It's just going to take you a few more hours, a few more something. Even let them win a tournament, blow a tournament. It don't matter. You're going to get all the chips regardless at the end. These guys were so stupid that after a while, it's like every time you're playing blackjack, the dealer gets a 20. The dealer gets a 20. After a while, you're thinking you know what? I can't win here.
Yeah. It was an interesting thing that happened because I was involved with Ultimate Bet at that time I was a partner of Bluff through what we were doing at Bluff, and one of the things that we were doing was working with Ultimate Bet and Absolute Poker, actually less Absolute Poker, but mainly Ultimate Bet, in terms of broadcasting their poker tournaments. So I produced and broadcast the Aruba Challenge, a couple of those. Went to Aruba, which was an awful place, terrible. And But we also did sort of live video streams of their poker tournaments, much like these kids now do on Twitch. You know, they watch people playing video games. So we would commentate. So we'd do live commentary, and the idea was that it would be me doing the play-by-play, and then obviously a poker someone that from Ultimate or would come in, and it was usually either Phil Hellmuth or Annie Duke, because they were the two spokespeople for those companies that had a small piece of the action. There was a tournament in particular that I did with. It was one of the I forget the name exactly. There's a whole thread on it on 2+2 forums. But Annie came in to do the play-by-play with me, and her boyfriend Joe. And she told me after they'd started that her boyfriend Joe Reitman, at the time, was actually playing in that tournament under I forget the name, the screen name he was on. And I said, well, you know, don't you think you should mention that while you do? Because the people that are playing this tournament are actually listening to us live. Don't you think that you should probably say something? Well, I don't know if I want to. And then I noticed after a while that you know, it seemed like she was maybe getting... Now, I want to make very clear, there was no super user account here. We were not able to see anybody's hole cards in this. But it certainly seemed like there was commentary being made to try to induce certain players to act, because obviously she knew what Joe had because he would text her, you know, what his cards were. Now, I don't think that's illegal. It may be unethical. I think we would all agree it's skirting on the ethics boundary. But there was a huge brouhaha after this. Everybody was convinced that we'd sat in the studio, we were looking at everybody's hole cards, and you know, she was cheating for him. And it absolutely wasn't the case, because I can guarantee you, if I actually used to play on Ultimate Bet, and if I actually thought somebody had a super user account, I would have been horrified. I mean, absolutely gobsmacked horrified. But, you know, it's amazing to me just, you know, what's the difference between that and people playing as teams? They do it all the time online poker, right? They get together, three of their buddies, and the brain trust works together, or people team up on tables together. I've seen that happen a lot online, right?
No, it's such a broad topic / problem you brought up, is that, you know, oh, you're not playing real high, so you can't possibly be cheated. Well, I don't think, I'm not saying you're saying that, but right. False, ring the buzzer, no. You know, I kind of came up through the ranks in the 90s at the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. That's where I used to play all the time. And the East Coast games, you would see teams. I'm not making this up. You'd see teams in the 3-6 limit hold'em games, teams of people. Yeah. Yes, you would see teams. There are still teams. There was a big thing that was broken up, and I used to work for Poker Stars. Full disclosure, so I have kind of inside information here. 7-card stud games. We noticed there were all these cities in China, or I forgot, all these unpronounceable names. It's like, how come there's 4 people from China playing 7-card stud? You know, this is kind of like when the game was somewhat unsophisticated, and now, by the way, this is the problem: is the cheaters, the colluders, the what have you, have become very, very good at what they do. They're very. This is the kind of the Wild West, and going back 15 years ago. But now they've become super sophisticated, and I don't like to cast aspersions and without some evidence. But I know for a fact there are teams that play in the Borgata. If you go to the Borgata and play right now in Atlantic City, in the 2-5 games, the 2-5 no limit hold'em games, which is the most popular game there, you know, there are teams that are playing. If you think that I'm wrong, email me, please. It's a fact. But it's a don't think you can't be cheated in low limit games. That's
but to touch on Nick's point, how horrifying is this? At least in the Borgata, you're playing live. So a team, they have to have little signal skills. You know, like I've got the nuts, I got the this. You know, and then you catch a guy and you imagine, like Nick said, you're in a beautiful studio. And you have 4 guys that are playing in a 10-handed game. And these 4 guys are all right there, and they're all buddies, and they can see each other's hand. Now, I'm leading out, and I've got the nuts. I bet. Here's the guy that, you know, we know he's got a hand. He calls. You're behind me because you can see that you raise. You're always making the guy pay so much more, and you don't even have to have the skills of giving me, like in a live game, a signal, and you know exactly what they have. Imagine playing that, like you're playing against 4 guys or 5 guys or 6 guys that absolutely are in a garage and know exactly what hands they each have. And every time you call, then another guy raises, and then he calls, and then you think you have the second best straight or something, and each time you get showed gin.
No, you're quite right, Frank.
That's even worse.
You have to differentiate between the term I'll use is just collusion or
Right.
players playing partners
and cheating.
off the same. By the way, it's kind of like low level off the same bankrolls. Well, you're not going to raise your buddy. You're not going to, that's very minor. And by the way, that's very common, especially in tournaments. Shared bankrolls, staking pieces. That's low level. By the way, I'm not sure you ever get rid of that the way this. And then you get into situations where signaling and just about live play. And then here's the thing is you get into what I call super user or what I call institutionalized cheating, where you're talking about somebody from the inside if somebody marked cards, a good example. Somebody fundamentally changing the nature of the game is much different than collusion. Doesn't mean they're all wrong. And by the way, as somebody who's played a lot of, probably like all of you, played a lot of hours in poker, my advice is always as follows. If you suspect, if the red light's off in your head, you're being cheated, just walk away or talk to a floor man, but don't stay in that game because, a lot of instincts that we have, like I play a lot of pot limit Omaha, for example. If there's 2 guys in that game or 3, that's one of those games that lends itself to you getting it may take 300 hands. But that one hand, boom, you're going to get raped
Nolan,
for $600 instead of $60.
You can't win. I've ran poker rooms before.
Right.
Trying to overcome the rake and the tipping. If you just have 2 or 3 guys that know what they're doing as a team, you're not going to win long run. You're just not going to win because you're always going to pay dearly. Every single time you lead out, you're going to get punished, and you're going to.
So Frank, listen to your gut instincts.
You can't win. Yes.
Listen to your gut instincts.
Forget it. I mean, it's tough enough to overcome the rake and the tipping, let alone 2 or 3 guys that are getting you in the middle that know what they're doing. Now, if you do that online, that's horrifying online. If each time I knew that imagine if 4 guys at the table, you knew exactly what each one of them had, and they're putting you in the middle of this every time. You got no chance.
I'm curious about something, and I'll run this to Mike. Okay, this is for any of you, but particularly Mike, since you've got some experience, obviously, in this area. I'm always curious about particularly the people that bring up these scandals. A lot of people, they call it river stars, the river would screw people and all this. If people are suspecting that they're being cheated, either institutionally or just by collusion, which is again 2 different things, why would people continue to play at the site?
They may think that everyone's cheating, maybe they're not sure. But yeah, I don't know. But I will say that I field accusations of cheating mainly against internet casinos all the time, and I say I'm welcome to get accusations, but they need to be backed up with data. You can't just say, "Oh, I lost like crazy. The dealer was getting a blackjack every other hand." No, I need to see data. I need to say, okay, if you're saying the dealer gets a blackjack every other hand, how many hands did you actually play, and how many blackjacks did he get?
Yeah, can you be specific about uncovering some of the scandals that you've again been the first? What was the to use the Malcolm Gladwell literary term? What was the tipping point for you that said, okay, this isn't just some loser who's bitching. This is legitimate. What was?
Okay, I have a whole blacklist on my website of internet casinos that have been caught cheating. Probably the most well-known case that I have proven was against, what was it called? Casino Bar. And they were hole carding in blackjack. And I had gotten some player complaints about them before, like there's something fishy about Casino Bar, but no one gave me evidence about it to prove it. And then somebody sent me some code that basically showed how they were doing it, and the person sent it anonymously. And then once I knew that they were allegedly doing it by hole carding, I played it and specifically tested them to see the percentages of the dealer busting by hole card. And it was totally obvious that the dealer was not busting enough. That if the dealer was hitting into, say, a 15 or a 16, surprisingly, they got their card a lot that they needed, that they weren't busting enough. And I presented my evidence that showed that the probability of the dealer busting as seldom as they were in a fair game was like 1 in a trillion. And I put up my evidence, and pretty quickly I heard from the casino bar lawyers, and they basically played the card that we have a lot more money than you. You can spend millions defending yourself, or you can apologize and retract the accusation. And I said, let's fight it out. You know, I don't even need millions of dollars to fight you. I
Tom
have
Petty,
the truth
I
on my
don't
side.
back down.
Yeah, exactly. So
Did they sue you?
they certainly threatened to, and at first they had some Israeli attorneys and that knew nothing about blackjack, and they were totally incompetent. And they hired a blackjack expert of their own, a professor in New York, and he said in his report, it was a really long report, but buried in the middle of it, he said, "I agree that Mike did not get a fair game." And I don't think that they read that sentence. So I was happy to quote it, and then they kind of shut up for a while. But then several months later, they come back with a very high-priced Manhattan law firm, and again, they threatened to sue unless I apologize and take down the accusation. And I still say, nope, bring on the lawsuit. And you know, it fortunately I had a very kind lawyer who was defending me on principle, and he didn't charge me.
Wow.
And I went back and forth through the attorneys with them a lot of times, but in the end, they were just bluffing and didn't do anything. And shortly after that, the casino went out of business.
What a surprise!
very
What a
nice.
shocker!
Bravo.
Well, guys, it's been a lot of fun.
No, you can't cut it off now.
Do you guys want to keep going?
my
You know,
goodness.
but we want to keep some stuff for next week. You know,
That's true. Yeah, but we got Mike. And Mike's
And there's
Mike,
so
that's
much
in-
stuff I
that's
want to get to,
interesting.
Mike,
Wow.
with you.
Yeah,
I
there's
hope- I hope you'll come back on. But I mean, the list goes on. But I have to very quickly ask you. You know, I was said I used to play a lot of the Rio, and then there was a time. You know, there is a point in video poker where you're seeing so many hands. You're going to hit jackpots. This is the nature of the beast, right? Now, variance is always involved. You can play low variance games. You can play high variance games. It's whatever your choice is. But at the end of the day, you're going to hit. What's the odds of hitting a royal flush in video poker?
About 1 in 40,000.
1 in 40,000, right? Exactly. So you know, play enough hands, you're going to see a royal flush.
Yep.
About 8 to 12 hours, or 16 hours, or 80 hours, however many hours it is you play. I noticed around 2009, right at the time that Harris, and Harris, I'm not making any, but I noticed when they were in going through some financial issues, and they were in the process of a takeover and their Apollo management and everything else, they had all these problems
the
going
deep
on.
state.
That all of a sudden, it completely dried up. And I am not the only person that feels this. A couple other people I know played a lot of video poker during that time period as well, and said the same thing to me. Boy, it just dried up. It wasn't like I went from having a winning month to having a losing month. It was like it went from someone just turned off.
And did the pay tables stay the same?
Pay tables stayed exactly the same.
Well,
But I can tell you, I went from getting, 2 or 3 or 4 jackpots a month, maybe more even, to not a single one over a number of months. Now, variance, I can understand that variance plays a role, but that seemed like an awful lot of hands to play, and I don't have the stats to prove it, which is what I should have done. But I don't have the stats. But it just boom.
By the way,
just went.
to follow up, the question is, he's kind of asking.
Yeah.
I'm being kind of rude.
Does anyone have the ability?
Just a minute. Are they capable of manipulating?
That's the question.
Are they capable of manipulation? And second of all, would they conceivably, like a casino that's having financial issues, would they? Could they? And would they?
Thank you. That's exactly that I was going to ask. Is it something they can do even?
Yeah.
okay, I would say that for a huge organization like Harris, for the big slot makers like IGT, they just don't cheat. They're just too big. They don't need to. They have their built-in house advantage. It's smart business to play fair and just make your money off that house
And
advantage.
I would agree with that, by the way.
Now, there was a scandal where some of the bars here in Vegas got their machines from a much smaller company that was deliberately coding their machines to hold back on the royals. They would only hit about half as often as would be statistically expected. So it's not like a video poker machine can't cheat.
Right.
But I really doubt that the big makers like IGT, I mean, back then I think IGT was the only company that did video poker. I really think that they're an honorable company, and they've never cheated in a hand of video poker ever.
It wasn't Gary Loveman saying, "Oh, I gave up too much through Total Rewards. Let me dial this back."
I'm sorry. You just said, could they? You said yes, they could. Just a minute. I'm going to make this point. Yes, they could. I think that's kind of what you said. They're capable of doing it. Yes.
Sure. All they would have to do is it would be easy to change the computer code.
So they could
to
do
cheat.
it. They could do it. Now,
Yeah.
would they?
No.
Wait a minute. Well, okay, I understand that. But can we just look at an historical precedent? Are you suggesting that? This always seems like the argument, like, oh, they got too much to lose.
No.
By the way, if you look at American history, that's just simply not a fact. By the way, wait, just a second. Excuse me for a second. When you're talking about corporations that are adhered to shareholder expectations, quarterly reports, profit expectations, things like that, executive bonuses, and people who know they're going to be out the door, let's say 8 months from now, and they got nothing to lose. Wait a second. Just a minute. Could they? Yes, they could. So why not maximize your potential profit by flipping that switch? Bang. By the way, I'm not saying it happens. I'm just saying that. Are you sure you want to dismiss the possibility of Nick getting screwed? That he's
Thank you. That's
I
gotta
would,
be an
I would,
excellent
I would,
reason.
I would say it's 100% he did not get screwed. I own my own 4 poker machines in my laundromat. They were IGT machines. Every year or every 6 months, the gaming commission would come in with their laptops, and they're all on RNG, random number generators. Okay, they would stick in their little code and they would run it. And I never did anything, and they would all make sure that everything was fine. All the casinos go through the exact same thing. Okay, there's no way that Harrah's is going to sit there and mess with the random number generators, like he said at a bar, which is absolutely true, with the machine, and like take out the probabilities of royal flushes or aces with a kicker. They don't need to. Nick was probably playing at 95 or 96% with his skill level and a 9-5 double bonus pay table. They don't need to cheat him.
I get
They don't
you.
need to cheat anybody.
By the way, I want to give you credit, a very good rebuttal.
Nolan, I'm telling you, they don't need to cheat anybody.
Hear me out. You're excellent. I applaud, admire what you just said. But let me just take this a step further, if I may. Forget about Harrah's, Las Vegas, what have you. Indian casinos.
Oh, well, who knows?
Wait, no, now you're throwing up your hands. I like this.
Well, I don't know
You
about
know where
that.
I'm going with this. I'm talking about environments, regions, places that what I consider the regulation maybe a little spotty. Is it possible that if you're in some Indian reservation, and this isn't disparaging against Indians, Native Americans, this isn't intended that way. A foreign casino could be any number. I'm talking about places where regulations aren't as tight. Could they flip that switch and screw the consumer?
It's not a switch. I've lived in this town 50 years. You know how many times I hear the most imbecile things say when people come up to me and say, "Oh, it's during the drawings they're tightening the machine."
He just said that they're capable of doing it though.
Well, if everything's capable. I mean, NASA's capable of doing something to the shuttle. But I'm saying is like when people say, "Oh, it's the big drawings or it's the 4th of July," they come in and tighten the machines. I look at them and say, "What do you think? They come in the middle of the night with like a screwdriver and tighten?"
Yes.
Are you
Wait,
crazy?
wait.
Are you crazy?
Let me tell you
money's
how,
involved.
Let me
No
tell you how
way.
this went down because I see it. Yeah, I can visualize it. Okay, it's 2009. The earnings aren't there. The total rewards program
Yes.
has
No.
bankrupted
Yes.
Harrah's.
Yes.
Nick's there at the Rio playing 10-play video poker. Gary Loveman is up in his office. He's got his screens up. He sees me there. He gets on his computer. It's like, because he got pinged when my total reward card came in. Yeah, the light goes off. Nick goes, "Oh, let me get off this conference call." And he goes, click. Okay, yeah, no jackpots for you.
Bang!
That's it.
It's
That's
40
what happened.
it's 40,000.
You cannot tell me it didn't happen that
No
way.
way. It's 40,000 to 1 just on the Royal. I don't know. He would. Mike would know better on the full houses and up the other things.
Couldn't care about
There's such variances in that. You could hit back to back Royals, or you could go 3 years without hitting a Royal.
Right.
That's how.
I
40
did preface the
you know what I
discussion
mean?
by saying the variance is obviously.
There's no way they're going to go in there and
it
mess with
wasn't
those
just
little.
Listen, let me just cut to the chase. You've kind of like seen us argue here. Does Nick's protest claim have any merit?
Did Gary Loveman have it out for me? That's
Does-
really what I'm
no,
talking about.
that's not the same question. Does his concern have any merit? Doesn't mean that. Do you agree with him? It just means does his concern have any merit? Yes or no?
His concern about, yeah, I would say it has no merit. I would say if you think that they were cheating, show me some evidence.
All right.
There's a confirmation bias means that you remember what conforms to your theory and you forget what doesn't. And that's why you see there's so many urban legends about gambling. Like I said, I'm happy to consider any legitimate evidence that anyone is cheating on any game. I'll consider it. So,
All right. So
The good news, though, Nolan.
but unless
No,
I see the evidence,
appreciate
I
the honesty.
presume they're not cheating.
I appreciate the honesty, but again, you've been in this town for a long time.
Yeah.
You have inside information. You know what these casinos, and particularly these corporations who are adhered to quarterly financial expectations.
Yeah.
You know what they're capable of doing. And by the way, I used to work for Caesars Harrah's myself. I'm not going to, I don't have any inside information about the slots or his question. But I do know that they're capable of doing almost anything to squeeze every single dollar out of meeting an expectation. And don't tell me that they have any moral or ethical objections to doing so. My question to you was initially, were they capable of doing it? You answered yes already. They are capable of doing it. And now you're ascribing some sense of, well, we have too much to lose. No, we wouldn't possibly do. And by the way, I understand. By the way, you got this. You got pi on your shirt, 3.145926. I get that, and I admire the very fact that everything is science based. But I just think that you could, and I want you to rebut me. I do think that to dismiss out of hand a guy who's been involved in this for a lot of years, myself, we've discussed this, is to just outright dismiss it as, it's just an aberration, whatever. I think that I'm not convinced that what you've said is fully correct.
Okay, let me say that there is no just like cheat switch that they can switch.
That's what I want.
Okay,
Okay.
no, it would take a lot of people in on it. I think it would be the slot maker, the casino, and the gaming control board that would all have to be in on this conspiracy. It would just take one whistleblower to ruin the whole thing.
Okay.
And furthermore, there's player advocates like me that I'm happy to sit there and play, and with my own money and my own time, to verify accusations of cheating. So they would have a little to gain and a ton to lose by doing it. And I think that the smart casinos, yes, everyone loves profits, but they also like consistency, and they also like gradual, consistent growth. And I don't think they would want to risk their whole organization over a cheating scandal.
Are you convinced, Nick?
Yeah, no, I am convinced, because I do actually tend to. I keep asking the people that come down to the machines and service them. When you're there, I offer them a lot of money. I say, when you open it up, flip the bloody win switch for me. And they, to a man and a woman, they tell me there isn't one. And you can wave.
That's BS. I'm just calling BS. Somebody making $36,000 a year, they're not going to know anything. Okay.
Well, no, but someone's got to flip the switch.
There is no switch.
Look. I believe.
you're
I
not gonna-
believe
you're not
Gary
gonna show
Loveman
off.
got notified by text message every time my Total Rewards card was put in the machine, and he had it out for me, and he would make a beeline to his office or on his cell phone or whatever it was, and he'd flip that win switch off. But there is a happy ending to this story, everyone. I want
my.
to make sure everybody knows it.
All right, get a
as
towel,
we get
huh?
ready
We all
to.
like a happy ending here in Vegas.
Yes, exactly. Particularly Steve Wynn. As we get ready to wrap the show up, I might have lost untold thousands of dollars because of Gary Loveman's personal vendetta against me. But I want everybody to know that it all worked out well, because I got at least 3 free buffets.
No, but Nolan, I had
And having seen you eat, that means you're probably even.
Nolan, but I had one little twist to your corporation thing. See, I was here since 1964, and always one of the few things when the mafia and the people used to run this place when I was a little kid as my dad, you got easy comps. It was easy to go everywhere. It was a lot of fun. There wasn't all these corporations. The one good thing about the corporation, though, is that it is much safer right now that you're never going to get cheated versus a Stardust run by a mafia guy that could do something back then. Right now, the chances of a corporation cheating you, Harrah's, MGM, any of those big ones, is zero.
But you're going to lose
they don't
either
need
way,
to
though,
cheat
Frank.
you.
You're
But they
gonna lose
don't
if
need
the
to cheat you.
You lose to the corporation,
No,
or you lose to the mob.
If there
Which
was
one's
ever,
more fun?
And I'm not even saying that they cheated, but you have a much safer chance now at a corporation that's got $11 billion involved with 50,000 slot machines, all on, with IGT as your maker. You're not getting cheated. They don't need to cheat you. If you're playing a 9-5 double bonus 10 play, probably at nowhere near optimum strategy levels.
I play optimum strategy.
Oh yeah,
I'll give
okay,
you that.
okay.
Very good play.
Even at optimum strategies, a 9-5 double bonus at optimum strategy, they don't need to cheat you. There's no chance.
Just a second. Wait a second.
You cannot win in the long run.
By the way, I kind of you kind of won me over, except one thing. But let's just get back, gentlemen. Let's not forget about the discussion we were having 27 and a half minutes ago about if you've got the goods on the super user, the ultimate, you don't need to. You remember that argument?
You don't need to cheat them.
But did they cheat them?
Yeah,
did they cheat them?
Yeah, and how long did it last?
These various sites.
Yeah, but that's not the corporations. That's the humans.
Yes, they did, because you know what? Because humans are humans and they'll do things.
Right, but that's
and
an
they're greedy.
online poker site. That's not Harrah's and
Yes,
Gaming
you're
Commission.
correct. You are correct.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same thing, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible.
It's very, very highly
Because you're quite right. If people behave rationally all the time, I wouldn't even be discussing this, but they don't, because they're greedy and there's a lot of other factors going on.
people don't realize the average gambler here in this town, especially the locals. I can't believe the locals are so foolish sometimes. They don't understand the variances in things, that probabilities that can happen. You can hit 4 aces with the little card 5 times in 8 hours, and then you may not hit it for 4 months.
All right, let me run something by you. I know we're going long, but hey, this is just riveting. On video poker? On video poker, is there such a thing as a hot machine?
No.
No.
No, absolutely not. Never.
I know that answer.
Well, this thing it's hitting like crazy.
When that happens, it's just the bell curve. All gambling is like throwing a dart at the bell curve. And yes, sometimes you can look back and say, oh, the last hour this machine has been hot. But the odds that the next hand is going to be hot are the same as any other machine in the casino. Is
the machine near the door or near the
That's another myth.
Not true.
That's not true.
Something in a corner near the bathroom is as good a machine as...
No, I have studied this, and casinos, let's say that they like a 90% nickel slot machine, all of them will be set that way. It doesn't matter whether it's by the door or it's in the darkest corner of the casino.
No, but hold on a second. So here's a question that you will get asked, and I've actually asked this question. It's been answered, but I'm going to ask it to you because I think if you're watching this and you're into video poker, this is something you need to know. So let's go to Nolan's scenario here. There's that machine. It's by the exit, or the one at the bar, right by the hookah bar, where all the girls go and put their
Nick hangs out.
Their quarter in, so they get their free drinks and wait for their johns. It's getting a lot of turnover. That machine, a lot of hands rolling through that machine. If a machine will present a royal flush once every 40,000 hands, doesn't it make sense that a machine that turns more hands will present a royal flush more often based on a specified time frame?
Of course.
Okay, so then that would go to say, yes, that machine by the door that sees more hands is going to present more royal flushes within a certain time frame than that machine in the back that doesn't.
Well, but the percentage of royal flushes is the same. That's what matters.
No. The it's still going to be 1 every 40,000.
Right, but it's getting more ones.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if the machine, so there are machines that are, lucky is not the right word, that are going to pay out more within a short period of time, because when you are not playing them, they're more likely to have someone else sitting there playing them, rolling through their
Nick,
hands, right?
it doesn't make sense what you're saying. That machine's getting more hands per hour. Of course it's going to get more of a bigger... That's like saying you walk into a carnival and they give you five 5,000 darts or they give you 2,000 darts. Well, with 5,000 darts, you're more likely to pop the balloon that's got the royal on it. I mean, you've got 5,000 draws at it.
That's not what I'm saying.
Wait a
though.
second.
Yeah.
Let me just say something that gets back to the crux of this discussion and argument. Is when I saw about 2 years ago in this town, in Las Vegas, there was a proposal on the part of the casinos, the corporations, to basically, I'll call it hot wiring. They wanted to be able to manipulate slot payouts based on the level of play, and like, in other words, if you're a 7-star member, I'm not making this up. This is a fact. I didn't say they did it. They were considering the situation, and they pitched it, and it was basically what I call in politics, we call it a trial balloon. They put this out, and of course everyone was like, no, I'll never play this again if this is done. The very fact that a corporation is considering, and again, manipulation of true odds, randomness, when they're willing to at least even consider the possibility of screwing the randomness and manipulating it where the $100 player is getting paid off more than, say, the dollar player. The very fact that came up to me was a huge red flag. It tells me they're capable of anything. It tells me that when corporations are making a bunch of money and they still drop sludge in the river, when they're still willing to do that and risk it all, because that's what corporations do. Because all they're concerned with is profit. The next quarter, the bonus. That's all. And by the way, do I sound like a cynic? Yes, because history has proven me correct. History has proven me right time and time again that corporations have no morality, no ethics, and they will squeeze every single dollar out of your pocket, and your pocket, and your pocket, and my pocket. It doesn't matter for sports bettors or for slot players. They will squeeze every dollar they can. Am I wrong?
Said
Yes.
Comrade Nolan.
You are wrong. You are wrong, Nolan. I'm telling you, the only little games that I've ever seen the casinos play that that they can like try to squeeze your do. I've seen actual like a bank of 4 $2 double bonus machines. That'll pay like 9.6, and then the one in the middle pays 9.5. Like they'll throw that in there, in case you're not aware. But because you're not aware, they'll throw in. But all they can do is remember your level of skill. They can't control. Okay, they can only control the pay tables. I've seen actually like eight full pay machines, and in the middle they'll put 2 with like on a certain game, like take a 5 off the full house, take a 5 off the flush, take little. So if you're not aware and you're playing it, you're playing a 9.5, and your friend right next to you, same denomination, same thing, is playing a 9.6.
Right.
That's the only little games that they can play.
I've seen that, and I've seen that at big casinos.
They don't. But
yeah.
do you understand? Like, look, it's. You got the Gaming Commission and the Gaming Control Board checking your RNGs, your little chips in the back at all times. You have billions of dollars involved. You have poor players. You have tourists. You don't need to cheat anybody.
But
you'll get all the money anyways.
But I want to go back and ask this question because I'm getting conflicting information here. Understanding that the game's random and that I stand an equal chance of getting a royal flush if they have a machine over, and we will have a video poker machine here on set. We need it.
Oh no!
If I were to walk over to that machine, I would stand and put enough in for $5 for one spin. I would stand just as much chance of hitting a royal flush on that as I would any other machine. I wouldn't just stick $5 in, right? Correct?
Okay, well, let me.
Assuming the same machine, same paint, same table. But so the question though is, if it's based on number of hands. Is it the number of hands I play, or is it the number of hands the machine is played?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Okay, first let me clarify that when I said before the odds of a royal are 1 in 40,000, this depends upon the player's strategy a little bit. For example, do you go for, if you have a high pair or 3 to a royal, what do you do?
Right.
So the 1 in 40,000 figure is based on optimal player strategy.
Assuming I
Yes.
do. I play optimal
Yes.
strategy. Okay,
Right. So if you play the same strategy, your chances of getting a royal will be the same on any single machine in town, except Joker Poker, because there it's a different deck. So yeah, I absolutely say that. And to go back to something you said, let me. What was I going to say?
I was saying 1 in 40,000.
Yeah.
Is that on me, or is that on how many hands the machine is playing?
It's not like it gives out a royal every 40,000 hands. It's like the
probability,
lottery.
the odds of getting it.
Yes,
Yeah.
every single hand you play, the chances are 1 in 40,000 about, including the hand right after a royal. It doesn't matter how long it's been since
And
the
I've hit
last
2
one.
royals in a row, by the way, but that has happened. But now,
Back to back.
I've seen it.
yeah.
I've seen it at
And
Sam's.
so then I want to go back to the proverbial machine by the door, but in the hookah bar. If that machine is turning more hands within a given stretch of time, it's going to therefore pay out more based on frequency of operation.
Right,
not
it'll,
even-
right. It'll pay out royals in proportion to how much it's played. But what the player should care about are what are my odds right now. Like there's at the convenience store in Barstow or Baker, it says we paid out more lottery jackpots than
Yeah.
any other gas station in California. It doesn't mean anything because they probably get the most play
Right.
of any gas station.
Okay, fair enough. So to go back to something that happened before we were even on the air, right before we were getting ready to go on the air, you were looking at speed. By the way, we this is where we're going with this whole discussion. Speed video poker.
Yeah.
And if you don't know why that's important, I'm going to tell you, and then I want to hit you to tell us about those guys, and then we'll wrap the show on that. But you want to see as many hands as you can when you're sitting down, because the more hands you see, the more chances of you hitting something.
If you have the better of it.
If you have the best of it.
Right. If you have the worst of
it.
it, which most players do, you should play as slow as possible.
But if you are a video poker player and you're sitting down to bang it out that night, you're going to
Yeah.
try to play as fast as you can, right?
Right.
Okay.
Not sacrificing errors.
No, that's the key, because the edges are so thin here. You have to play optimal strategy and not make any mistakes. And the worst thing, by the way, the other thing, this is a little aside before we get to the final question. It's important. I always say game selection, just like poker, is choose the right game. Sit at the table. Don't sit with Phil Ivey. Go sit at the table next to with a bunch of schmoes from Poughkeepsie. Go play with those guys. As long as that NPI, not Phil Ivey, you want to sit there, right? Same thing with video poker. Sit at a place where you're not distracted. Make sure that you have a machine the buttons don't stick. That's another big one. Sticky buttons will wreck your optimal strategy.
Yep.
Okay. And make sure that that your player's card is in and that you're getting your comps, because that's a big part of the value equation.
Yep.
And then go at it. So here's my question for you. To be a true video poker maestro, how many hands should you be hoping to play an hour?
That's a good question. I think that if you are going to be a professional or semi-professional video poker player, I think you should endeavor to be at least 1,000 hands an hour.
Okay, so if we break that down, how many hands a minute is that?
So
Mr. Math Man.
yeah, so 1,000
divided by
divided by
60
60 is let's see
It's like
here.
166.
The only man who comes on a show with a handheld calculator. The
Yeah,
Wizard of Oz.
16
Yeah,
hands.
16.7 hands a minute.
Right, so that's
that's
about
pretty
one every
fast.
5 seconds.
Right. I mean, you're
Every what? Every 3 seconds?
No, but every 5 seconds, right?
yeah. So if
Every
you're
5
playing something like the Suncoast is having 6 times points and there's no cap on it, yeah, your hourly expected profit is going to be proportional to your speed. So in situations like that, speed is super important.
Right.
And that's one reason I don't make a great video poker player, because I'm not that fast.
Got it.
But it's always better to go a little slower than make an error.
Yeah, you don't want to make errors.
Yeah,
Agree.
you definitely want to err on the side of playing accurately.
And-
Accuracy is more important than speed.
And most importantly, if you're playing at a Harrah's or Caesar's property, make sure you don't play with my total rewards card.
Just to get the visual of the 40,000 to 1 royal flush, let me give you a great visual of it. Say you threw 40,000 ping pong balls into a big giant basket. Now one of those ping pong balls said royal flush. Okay, so then you press the thing and the machine sucks the ping pong ball out. Well, eventually, after a long period of time, every 40,000 times, that ping pong ball's going to have that royal flush in it. But as soon as you hit it, and you go, oh, look at this, I got the royal flush, it gets thrown back into the hopper and shaken up again.
Right, understand
Okay.
that. And, the key is there are 40,000 balls in there. Be prepared to take all 40,000 out to get the one that's the one blue ball that's going to give you the royal flush.
It's
but
all
look,
random.
that's just how the game works. I think it's really important that people that play video poker really understand it. Next time you're on the show, and I hope that that's going to be soon, I really can't wait to talk to you about slot machines because I don't personally play them, but I know a lot of people that do. I think they're terrible machines to play. They do. That's why the casino gives you the most points to play them because they want you to play them. I know they make a lot of money on them. But there must be some strategy to maximize, or let's just put it this way, as Annie Duke told Joe Reitman, she gave him a system for playing, I forget what the game was. It was a slot machine that Joe would love to play. And this is when they were still together. And Annie's very smart, as you know. And Joe came to me one day and explained the system that Annie had given him. And when he wins, he was supposed to then bet less the next time and then less the next time. And I was thinking about this system and I finally figured out, no. This isn't a system on how to maximize your winnings. This is a system on how to extend the life of your bankroll.
No,
right?
but
So I want to ask you a question. We'll do this next time on slot machines. What is the best strategy to play with slot machines? Is there a winning strategy, or is there a strategy to maximize the return you can get on your bankroll?
All right, well, I'll give you the long answer the next time, but the short answer is there are some advantage plays with slots, and I'll talk about that. But I agree, slots in general are the worst thing you can bet on. They have a high house advantage, very high rate of play, very addictive. My advice, if I can just say one thing to the world out there, it's don't play slots. I don't think I've converted anybody yet, but they're a terrible form of gambling.
That was a recent
Did you know in the mid 90s I used to play at Texas Station and I played nothing but slot machines and I was a guaranteed winner every single night. Back then they had vision games or like a cherry pie. If you filled up a cherry pie, you got a thing, or a diamond mine, or the home run machine. So I would walk by, and when the people were filling up the cherry pie, they would leave. There'd be 2 or 3 cherries left, 58 in the basket. As soon as I sat down, there were times I was playing at nearly 130% ratio.
That's why you're on the show, Frank.
No, but
Give us the cherry
am
pie.
am I right or not?
Yeah, no, and these
No,
those are old games, but there are games right now, what I would call variable state games, where players like feed money into like a bank, and when a certain event happens, the player who achieved that thing gets the bank. And if the bank is above a certain point, it becomes an advantage play.
So how can you find out what the bank is?
Yeah, it shows it to you,
tells you.
but back then it showed it to you like to fill up the whole cherry pie, you got a bonus of between 25 and 200 plus whatever was in the little basket. Once there was like 8 to play and 30 in the basket, or I forget the exact numbers, but I played them every night. All I did was win. I could not lose. Wow. I could not lose. It was impossible to lose for the long run. I could lose on that particular cherry pie, but if I played enough of them, or the diamond mines, when you had like an 8, 8, 7 on the diamond mines, and when the thing got to 10 diamonds, it paid you the bonus. Tourists would play, or people would play, they'd get it up to like a 9, 8, 6. I was playing at a tremendous advantage. Wow. Those were vision games. But of course, I walked around classy, well dressed. I never stood behind a player hoping for them to leave, like hawking the player. And of course, what ruined it is you got all the jerks standing behind the players, waiting for them to leave. Like, oh, I hope this tourist leaves this machine. It's already hit past 100% EV on the bonus, and then the tourists would get like this. Then they would fight to get on the machine when the person left, so they took them all out. Yeah. But I made $200 to $400 a night playing quarters. Wow. It was amazing.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Want to thank you for watching. It's been a lot of fun. A special podcast edition of His Street Sports. It's been a riot. Want to thank Mike Shackleton for coming in. Mike, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'd be happy to come back.
Well, we'd love to have you back. You are definitely a subject matter expert beyond all others.
He passed the audition.
Yeah, Frank. Hey, wait! It's not cherry pie time.
No.
Okay. Right, okay.
So,
she's getting you. Nolan, thanks a lot. Boggs, great job there. Back on the switcher. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take off, and we will be back. Don't forget, next Friday, 1 p.m., Fifth Street Sports Soccer. I'll be going through Champions League. I'll be doing the Premier League.
The red hot Nick game.
I am red hot, by the way. There are some midweek Premier League games. I might do a special podcast for them. And then we'll be back on the air on Sports Byline USA Radio Network, SB Nation Radio, American Forces will be back on our usual network next Saturday. So hope you'll tune in then. Until then, from all of us, have a great weekend.
Mike, am I not correct? Those vision games were the funnest things to play.